We're gonna give ourselves ZJs right now.
All right.
What's the Z?
We'll discuss it later.
All right. So Dan just informed us that we are nominated for, and I'm scrolling down here, local podcaster. Is that what we are?
I think it's under Superstar.
Hey, we're there. What a week.
Wow.
Well, we are nominated, which means somebody recommended us. That Bill Corcoran on the Stacks one.
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to that? He's pretty good, man.
Really?
Yeah.
You're doing this wrong, Mark.
What do you mean I'm doing it wrong?
You don't talk about the people who work up against.
No, man. I think you got to lift people up. Popco. I listen to Popco.
That's a good one.
Yeah, he's a good one. The other ones I don't know. The pod guys I may have heard. Oh, Success Fundamentals. That's here. We do that here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Joe Snedeker we don't do.
Snedeker. Getting to know the 570. I've heard about that one.
Getting to know the.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, 570. It's very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
You seem to have the lung.
Ed Pekulski, which is not a name for a podcast. It's just his name. But he works at the Times.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, so he's got a lock on.
Oh,
this.
man.
They're going to vote for
that's cheating. Isn't that cheating, Cade?
A little bit of an inside job, sounds like.
A little bit of an inside job?
570 Music Chat / Ghoul Friends.
Oh, man. Ghoul Friends. Oh,
Beauty by Becca.
I never heard of it.
What is On the Stacks?
Oh, so that is, where is it? On the Stacks.
Right.
On the Stacks. Did I miss it?
It's Corcoran on the Stacks, something like that.
Yeah, so it's, he talks like business people. I think the last one he just did was with Matt McGloin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he gets he gets really good stuff. I think it's Universal. Cool. I think he's Universal Printing. So he does it out of the Universal Printing building down by Mark Payne's garage.
Okay.
And it's a well produced. I think Ionic Development produces it. They're good people, and okay. He's. Yeah. We'd love to. We should get him on. He'll never put us on his, but we should get him on. So, all right. Well, we just wanted to, I don't know, pat ourselves on the back.
We just realized we were. Or are you under local filmmaker?
No, they'll never put me under there anymore. Nope.
Wow.
Not on there. Although Vinny Langdon's on there? I thought he just cuts hair.
Huh.
Well, whatever.
Anyways.
AL's on there.
Yeah.
John Yankondi.
Anyways, if you're listening to this, just go vote for
what
us.
Or on the Stacks.
Or on the Stacks.
We're easy to find because we're all the way at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you name it with a W.
Yeah.
Oh, is this Gia? Oh, that's Instagrammer.
Local Instagrammer. Am I on there? I'm pretty popular on the IG.
Dan, we need to up our Instagram game, and I think you can do that. I think you're on your way to upping the Instagram game.
I'll be our influencer.
Hey, is Lavish on there?
No.
Obviously not the podcast one. But
no, local Instagram? No, there's no salon.
I understand, but it's best of. Is there a salon category?
I don't know. Is this what we're going to do right now?
Yeah, we're going to vote for us right now.
I don't know where salon is.
There's best hairdressers and best nail technicians. And
yeah, it just keeps opening things as I'm sliding at Micah. It's terrible.
You want to know a fun secret?
Yes.
Back from my days when I worked for the Electric City and the Times, it just automatically goes to whoever spends the most advertising dollars.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes lots of sense.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Is that, because then they call you and they say, hey, do you want to do an ad?
Well, no, it's like if your business doesn't advertise with them, and then another business that does spend a lot of ad dollars with them, if you win, they're not going to give it to you because the other people are going to be like, guys, seriously?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, that's just how it goes.
It's just like the Oscars.
Say, what's your advertising budget?
0.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which ain't bad. Which ain't bad for...
No, we're doing okay.
Okay.
Anyways, back to what we're here for. Cade is back.
Hello. Yeah.
How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Glad to be back.
How you been?
Yeah. It's been a nice 6 months personally. On the global scale, it's maybe a little bit of a different story.
So you're saying things aren't going well.
So before you get into that,
yeah,
the good, bad, or indifferent of the state of the world right now. We had you on, I think it was like episode 4 or 5.
Yeah, it was pretty early on.
We had no idea who you were. Micah just texted me. He's like, hey, there's people protesting on a corner. Do you want to have them on? And I'm like, sure. And then you came in, and I think we talked about you for weeks afterwards. We're like, that was just so interesting. And I still don't know if I agree or disagree with anything that you said, because it was just so kind of information overload. I think after a lot of time, I'm starting to see some of the things that you were talking about, and you handed us this an article from September 28th, 1987, from Lyndon LaRouche's group, and the headline is "The Deeper Grounds for Philosophical Doubts Respecting the Existence of Joe Biden."
Joe Biden.
I didn't read it yet, but I was looking. I did watch some stuff today about Lyndon LaRouche. And one of the interesting things to me would be, that meme going around about all the things Alex Jones got right? Lyndon LaRouche, I guess prior to that was Alex Jones. In a sense, not to say that,
without the crazy.
I don't think he's a fun crazy. He's a fun, he's like a Brat Packer crazy, where it's like, he's kind of like, who was that dude in The West Wing? He had the sex tape. Rob Lowe. He's like the Rob Lowe of crazy.
I mean, if Rob Lowe was consistently on high doses of cocaine, yes.
We're talking about Alex Jones, right?
Yeah, Rob Lowe was
on
huge doses of cocaine. There's a video. He had the first video in the 80s.
Jeez.
Like those secret sex videos?
Yeah.
Rob Lowe was one of the first ones. It was a huge scandal.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah, I find it interesting that in the context of today, because I wanted to know, what would Lyndon LaRouche be in the context of today? So how do you think the world's going since we last talked?
There's some optimistic points within the sort of morass of, I think it was about 6 months ago when we last talked. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think we ended the conversation with a question of what does the future look like according to LaRouche's method of forecasting. And I think the answer I gave was something like every 6 months or so, you'll have another sort of phase shift into a sort of darker moment, but it'll just get normalized very quickly, and that the threat of thermonuclear war was something that wasn't being talked about enough and is actually something that we're a bit on the precipice on.
Yeah, Russia's said it a few times right now.
Yeah, not just Russia. You have people within our own state services and Biden Security Council ratcheting up the rhetoric about tactical first strikes from a position of ballistic inferiority compared to Russia at the moment too.
But that's ballistic inferiority. We just have more?
No. We have a worse technology when it comes to nuclear missiles right now. Because
I saw this in the Senate. I saw it in the House the other day. There was a back and forth between, I think, the Secretary of Defense and a representative by basically saying, we are behind in weaponry as far as hypersonic weapons with China, with Russia. And the Secretary of Defense is like, that's not true. Cut to the head of the Air Force going, we are behind in hypersonic technology So what was your term of ballistic?
Ballistic Russia has, let's say, ballistic superiority at the moment, for sure.
As far as just nukes go.
And
or just first strike weapons.
The missile systems that they have, the technology of the missile itself. And this is a thread you can see back, going back to even the mid 2000s. Ray McGovern, who's someone who works with us, he's a former professional with the CIA. He's one of the founding members, I believe.
We know some too.
Okay. Yeah. No, I saw it was an interesting conversation for sure.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
He's not bad, right?
No,
he's a great
bad.
guy.
He's not bad on Russia. But
gotta get you and Sam Faddis together.
Yeah, that would be great.
Man, what a good shot! What a good talk. Okay, keep going.
Well, Ray McGovern, he's one of the founders, I believe, of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, the VIPs. He was putting out articles for antiwar.com towards the end of last year, and he was referencing different videos of Putin at different forums in the mid 2000s and sort of the mid 2010s, where Putin was kind of giving a straightforward plea even about what the position Russia was in at the moment, that the United States had left multiple ballistic missiles treaties, ostensibly under the guise of the threat of Iran if they were to get nuclear weapons, that they needed some missile defense systems close by in that area. But then one of these later clips, it's even Putin references how the Iran treaty had been passed by then and hadn't been revoked by then, and still the United States was in the same position. So that was obviously a falsification of their reasoning for that. And Putin talks about how Russia had just gone full force into their offensive systems. And there's another interesting thread about the actual technology, its interaction with different plasmas and magnetohydrodynamics and how they're able to get to the point where they are. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that for now. But basically, Russia did what they said they were going to do. And within the last few years, and even in the most recent conflict, they're able to demonstrate the actuality of the weapon systems that they have. And you can see clips even on Russian television within the last week or so.
Was it real that I saw a clip of a hypersonic weapon flying over Ukraine?
It's possible. It seemed like they were used to a limited capacity, and mostly it seemed like to verify that they had that capability,
right.
More so than of a strategic necessity within the arena.
Can you hold your thought for those who don't know what hypersonic weapons are?
Basically, it's a missile that's able to go beyond the shockwave limits of missile technologies by using a sort of ionization of the air around it process. So it's able to it's able to go faster than really any sort of missile defense system would be able to track onto it.
So I heard it explained in a way. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? So did you ever hear the term MAD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that stands for mutually assured destruction. At the time, especially at the peak of the Cold War, you had about like 25 minutes from a first strike notification to you basically had enough time to say, are they sending enough to destroy us, and should we destroy them before?
Right.
So we're going to be gone.
Time.
We have a response time. With hypersonic weapons, I think you have 30 seconds, minute and a half.
Well, the hypersonic weapon we're trying to develop, one of them is called Dark Eagle.
United States
is trying to develop. We call it Dark Eagle. With all the saber rattling going on right now, we're threatening to put this weapon system in sort of Western Germany, and our threat is that, and it could get to Moscow within 5 minutes. But with the technology that Russia has right now, is they can get a missile to London within 3.5 minutes. And
jeez,
you have no time,
and
you have zero time.
You also have nuclear subs from Russia, pretty close to the coasts of both coasts of the United States as well. So
you just brought up England, and for me that kind of piques my interest because I lived there for so long. What is going on currently with England and Russia? Because I know that
there is some saber rattling.
Yeah. I know that England has probably put the most sanctions on Russia of any country.
Yeah, they lead the.
So, and Russia has directly come right back and said, listen, if this keeps going the way it's going, you're target number one.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? Like, what happened?
Well, even if you see Boris Johnson's visits to Kiev, his talks with Zielinski, I think even recently he used sort of the Churchill type rhetoric about, this is Ukraine's, I think, finest hour, or whatever the phrase is. Yeah. Basically, England is using the same playbook they have for the last 130 years or so with Mackinder's the origin of geopolitics with Mackinder's heartland theory, where basically British and now Anglo-American dominance is dependent upon the isolation of especially Russia, and absolutely the prevention of any large cooperation between a strong Eurasian power, which would be assumed to be Russia, and a strong Eastern power. Right now, that would be potentially China. And you can track that thread through both the world wars, through the work of Zbigniew Brzezinski, starting in the Carter administration.
Is that
in the
Mika's
70s.
dad?
That is Mika's dad, yeah.
Morning Joe Mika?
Yep.
Yeah.
Joe's wife? That's her dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was an ambassador. He was all these things, wasn't he?
Yeah, he in a couple ways you could say he maybe designed 9/11, but the most top level way would be to say
can you give me just one of the couple?
I'll give the most maybe
you can get the entirety, man.
Okay, I'll maybe get the most palatable one.
You sound like
I hear that. A little bit better.
Sexy.
Get some of those deeper resonances for sure.
Yeah.
But Brzezinski was the lead architect behind the whole Afghanistan policy in the 80s of trying to get the Soviets
Charlie
into
Wilson stuff.
Get their own Vietnam within Afghanistan. And there's certain quotes from him where he talks about, he's questioned about, like, well, what about this radical Islamic terrorism, or whatever the phrase was used back then? Like, what about that we're feeding into right now? And, well, who cares about that? The whole point is, I'm going to bring everybody out of, Soviet communism, and no real concern for any kind of blowback from that. And even just to get this through line to the contemporary state of quote unquote geopolitics, right at the beginning of the Russian entry into Ukraine, you had Hillary Clinton on MSNBC, and she was talking about how, similar to Boris Johnson,
February of 2020.
Yeah, I believe late February or early March, she was saying how, this is also, a bright moment for the Ukrainian people. Like they need to look to the Afghans in the 80s as their inspiration to have this sort of strong insurgency and really entrench and fight back against these Russian invaders. And, if you just take 2 seconds to think further along those lines, one, how well did that turn out for Afghanistan in the long run?
Right.
And two, well, what became of those insurgents in Afghanistan in the 80s, 20 some later
Right.
for the United States?
And also, they historically say that the Afghanistans defeated the Russians.
Yeah,
That's what we hear. You hear I remember when America was going to war, they're like, remember what happened with the Russians? When they went to Afghanistan. So I was under the impression that the Afghanistans just held off that superpower.
Yeah, and then they were able to bring how much of Russian territory they were able to make Afghanistan, right? Where they were able to expand further, and now Afghanistan is one of the large superpowers, one of the regional hegemons we're contending with, right? They really won that war, right? But the question is then who did win that war?
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
If you see what happened in the Yeltsin years and the sort of kind of literal genocide that occurred in the Soviet Union by financial means afterwards, and who was able to profit from that, I think it's pretty easy to see it's the same sort of forces working now, trying to get the same sort of thing to go off in Ukraine. And that's the reason you don't see the United States really involved in any of the negotiations at all. That's why you see whenever, even early on, when Zielinski, and one of the articles that I sent that kind of detailed the conflict a little bit, when Zielinski did have one public message, and though it did have some bravado behind it, it was saying, but we will sit down for negotiations. We can talk about neutrality. And then a couple hours later, he's kind of got these dead eyes and that's off the table. And from reports we heard, he got calls from the UK and from the United States in the meantime. That Anglo-American faction doesn't want peace. It's similar to, you heard certain Israeli ministers talking about Syria at the time in 2012, 2013. They were asked about, what's the best outcome for Israel? And it's like, well, it's no winner. It's a continuation of the conflict. And again, going back to Brzezinski, in his book, The Grand Chessboard, I believe it's called, he details this expansion upon Mackinder's theory of geopolitics and the heartland theory of Eurasia, where specifically he brings out this idea of an arc of crisis, which was used in Afghanistan, which is this idea where you want just never-ending conflict zones that surround these potential rivals geopolitically. And he even later on talked about expanding the arc of crisis from Western Asia or the Middle East into more of Eastern Europe as well. And you're just kind of seeing the fulfillment of that policy plan right here with Ukraine. And you can see in the rhetoric of the people involved.
So when you say a policy plan, I remember, Dan, when you get a chance, can you look up on YouTube Wesley Clark Iraq invasion? And I want to play that. It seems like these things are not like we're just deciding this over the next few months. It seems like some of these things are planned out years, if not decades in advance.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, there's a 2019 RAND paper too. You can see where they directly talk about here's how we can antagonize Russia. Here's how we can get them into Ukraine if we do X, Y, and Z. And that's what we did, subsequent to that as well, especially once Biden entered office. And when you look at from the Russian perspective, going back to late winter of last year, they were pretty explicit about, for them, this is about the expansion of NATO. And you have what just came out, it was implicitly known, but more and more documents came out in the meantime about the verbal promise that was made between
George Bush.
Yeah. So, and through James Baker to Mikhail Gorbachev.
Do you know about this?
Yeah. NATO will not move 1 inch eastward was the promise.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
They've gone.
And Putin remembered that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And this was back in 1988, 90, 91, 92?
It'd be the early 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. He made this promise to when the Soviet Union fell.
Yeah.
There was a promise made that NATO will not incur east towards Russia.
It was a precondition of the reunification of Germany at the time too. Yeah.
So that was promised back then, and slowly over the last 30 years they've been creeping.
Well, and I think it might have been before we got on camera, but I was saying to you, obviously the way Russia is going about this is wrong. I mean, indiscriminately bombing. There's some things that are going horribly wrong. That being said, if Russia had weapons, missiles, biochemical labs on the border of the U.S. and Mexico or Canada, you better believe we're doing something about it.
Well, and you just need to look at the news stories about China and the Solomon Islands right now, right? If you've seen anything,
they're trying to take over the whole Pacific, that side, right?
Well, what's formally happened is that there's an agreement between China and the Solomon Islands that may include some sort of security protections, but the U.S. sees that as, China is potentially going to build a base there. And we can't allow that. That gives them too much of a strategic position to have over us. Like that itself is like almost tantamount to an act of war in the US's position. But if you talk about Ukraine and Russia,
Right.
There's no real principle there being applied.
So when I remember about 7 years ago that there was some shit popping off in Ukraine.
Yes.
Okay. I remember there was a coup. I remember we cared about it, but didn't care about it.
Oh, we cared about it
in the U.S.
If you're talking about the people, yeah, it was
the people really didn't.
story, but
they were just like, there's a coup.
Yeah, the Obama administration very much cared about it, especially Biden's position in the Obama administration.
So who was the ambassador to Ukraine at that time? Do you remember?
I'm not sure of the ambassador. I know Victoria Nuland was kind of the point person.
She was the State Department.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somewhere along the lines during that coup, phone calls were intercepted. No one knows by who. Everyone claims the Russians, right? In essence, it's the State Department and the ambassador of Ukraine basically plotting the roadmap for what Ukraine will be after the coup.
If we're thinking the same clip, it's where they're going through names who will be in the government,
who will do this, who will do that, who will be in charge of this.
It's mentioned what about the EU, and Nuland has the response. Well, fuck the EU is basically her position on
Correct.
it. Yeah.
So these are things that have. It's kind of like it's one of those. I think who said this? Was it Colin Powell who said, "You break it, you buy it"? I think in terms of like the Iraq War.
Yeah.
After the yellow cake uranium, I believe he said, at some point, like, you break it, you buy it. Like, it's our responsibility to do, which you think is a noble thing until you realize, like, well, why do we go in there in the first place? Which is another podcast. The Ukraine situation. I've hung around with younger adults. Early 20s, mid 20s, and they are freaked about what is going on as opposed to, us who have been like 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan.
When you say they're freaked, like, what do you mean?
They have never experienced a conflict in this way. They have never really seen a conflict that was like, it could look like Pittsburgh, where this stuff is going on. And it terrifies them. And they've just gotten through the COVID shit with them as young humans. I've never seen. I remember this. I was talking to this one girl I've been friends with for 8 years. I knew her when she was a young teenager. She's like, I don't know what to do. Like the fear in her face, and I'm like, it's happened before. It'll happen again. They're not going to nuke Scranton. Like, you need to relax on that. Not today.
Not Scranton. Yeah.
Well,
we're kind of within
we are.
the fallout
Scranton
cloud,
is
yeah.
a secondary target. You know that?
Yeah.
Chamberlain, man. They will bomb here next. What do you think? What do you think over the last few years has happened in Ukraine and with Russia? Because I don't think if we mad-libbed Russia for America right now, no one would have a problem.
I think,
is that a decent
well, it
way of
depends what you
saying?
mean by no one.
If it was, hey, NATO is encroaching, they're trying to put weapons at our border, basically first strike weapons. We've told you for 30 years, do not do this. And we're now at the point where we're like, fuck around and find out. Now you're finding out. I think if America was saying that, and let's say it was Canada, nobody would have a question with it. I don't think globally, especially the media, what they're going to say to you, no one would have this makes sense. Of course, they're encroaching.
Yeah, no, what you'd hear on the news certainly would not be what you hear today.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, the Solomon Islands shows that a little bit, even a little bit with the minimal work Canada is doing with China and the Belt and Road Initiative. You'll get flare-ups every now and then in a similar sort of regard in the media, is talking about that as a kind of encroachment. But I think the key is to kind of focus on that 2014 coup, and to even look what happened right before that. Was you had
Poroshenko?
Poroshenko was the guy who was put in. Yanukovych was the president at the time. Are you
going to tell this story about what happened? Okay, this is interesting. Did you hear this?
Well, let me ask it this way, because like I'm kind of being brought up to speed on some of this as we speak. So, what was the problem? What did the Ukraine and what did the U.S. What was their issue with the current government that was in the Ukraine 7 years ago when they were planning?
It was the Ukrainian people at the time. So they say.
Yeah. Okay. So in 2013, Yanukovych did not join basically a free trade agreement kind of, let's just say, Ukrainian NAFTA.
Mhm.
Now, one of them was allied more to the west. One of them was more allied to the east.
Well, when you say one of them, what do you mean?
Something
Like
whoever got out.
Poroshenko?
Yeah, whoever.
Yanukovych was actually seen as a bit of like even a dissident towards Russia prior to this point.
Okay.
You know, like especially within Russia, but even outside, like he wasn't pegged as like a real buddy with Putin.
Right.
But when he did not sign on to the free trade agreement with the West at the time, was kind of turning away from the idea of joining the EU, and requested from China plans of how to involve Ukraine within the Belt and Road Initiative, which was just announced about 3 months prior to this. That's when the heat really started to turn up. And he was looking a little bit towards Russia. And I think this is, in my opinion, this is really the frame for it. Is it's not just whether somebody picks the other side of the block. It's if they even start to play the game on both sides, which you can also see what just happened in Pakistan with Imran Khan.
They just had their prime minister assassinated or something.
Oh, well, yeah, vote of no confidence. Yeah, we did that back in the 70s, I think, with Ali Bhutto, which Imran Khan referenced at the time. But you know, he visited Russia shortly after the operations began. He saw this as a great time to get a deal for energy for the Pakistani nation in order to build themselves up domestically. And he even offered to be a mediator between the U.S. and China as well on a global scale. So this isn't somebody, you know, coming hard line on a side of another block of the Anglo-American
building
side.
Bridges.
No, a little bit there. Even the idea of that.
Or Silk Roads.
Yeah. But as has been documented within Pakistan, there's a certain diplomatic letter that was sent to his administration, which formally, legally couldn't like fully put out, but kind of let slip. The United States had said that if the no confidence vote against Imran Khan did not go through, there would be a lot of trouble for Pakistan.
So what you're saying is that the United States basically sent a letter, saying that if Pakistan
do this or
that, and that is what Kissinger did to Ali Bhutto in the 70s. He said, you have to stop your nuclear program. You cannot have nuclear energy. You definitely cannot have nuclear arms. And if you go any further with this, there will be strong consequences. And Ali Bhutto was then couped by the military, and I think just a few short months later, it was ended up hanged in public after a few months of torture. And EIR actually published a few excerpts from the manuscript he was able to get out of jail at that time.
So basically what the claim is right here is that the United States government is extorting other countries for some reason to have them behave a certain way, because an extortion is or else.
Yeah, no, and you can even look at most of
like their
Europe
foreign policy
well.
is this.
Well, because the question of Ukrainian sovereignty comes up a lot, and once or twice Putin will mention this idea of, well, what is sovereignty in the Western world right now? And especially, we did some reports on the Lisbon Treaty for the EU, I believe back in the mid-2000s, which like strongly consolidated how they're able to vote within the EU Parliament, which really shifted what sort of factions you could have to have dissent within the EU, and basically it made it a tributary of kind of England and Germany for the most part. If you look at the national interests of France and Germany in particular, the sort of sanctions approach to Russia right now is basically suiciding their economy.
That's what I don't understand.
Because I'd say effectively, you don't really have an idea of national sovereignty within Germany right now. And the same thing, if we put this Dark Eagle missile in Western Germany, they become, I'd say, even in front of London, target number one for any sort of nuclear first strike, which Russia has sort of the slight advantage at the moment to be able to do. But since you have a consolidation of media, you have a consolidation of both national and international parliamentary politics, you don't really have the effective functioning of nation states within the West, I'd say, at all. And I'd say even you look at certain cultural and media and elsewise factors within the United States, and it's kind of just slowly or even more rapidly kind of dissolving into this general finance block, which from the top down is sort of implementing what sort of geopolitical strategies they want at the time.
So in your opinion, well, so let me go back, because you brought in this paper. Can we talk about this real quick?
I don't know how relevant that is to the current situation. It got brought up in the last discussion.
It's a nice time capsule.
Here's why I ask that is this has been going on for 30 years. Why, as soon as Joe Biden goes into office, did this escalate exponentially?
Because you had some dissent to that block within the Trump administration.
Okay.
I'd say Trump was somewhat naive in his approach to, let's say, what he called draining the swamp or whatever, or didn't maybe have the full gumption to risk the sort of Kennedy blowback of fully doing what would be necessary to maybe restate national sovereignty in a certain way.
Right.
And since you didn't have this sort of, also the domestic operations that were run at that time in order to consolidate the media, you could look up the percentage of, nominally former CIA, FBI state officials who then become, media talking heads for them
on CNN.
Yeah, and even larger.
James Clapper should not be on CNN.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What was able to be run in opposition to Trump within his administration kind of set the tone for what could be done internationally then under a similar sort of guise. There's a bit of a back and forth because it's even, you have the color revolutions of the 2000s and the 90s as well, informing what happens under the Trump administration. And then that kind of informs back into what can be done again on a global scale. So I'd say just culturally, the kind of mindset of the West has been so limited to the sort of video game choice that they feel like they're able to interact with from moment to moment. And it's like, oh, you okay? You gotta,
everybody's playing Dragon's Lair, Dan.
Yeah. Put on this flag, get this option, get this upgrade. And you got to follow sort of a central plan with it. And anything outside of that is sort of inconceivable. That it's something that goes back to, Edward Bernays in his book Propaganda, Walter Lippmann in his book Public Opinion. There's a certain vested interest in the strong channeling of the options of public discourse to try and produce sort of win-win outcomes on either side of it. That I think that mixed with the cultural degradation of the last few generations has just produced an abyss of possibility within what can be brought up from the public and a large potential of what can be run on them in a certain way.
What do you mean an abyss of possibility? Like here's chum for your rage?
That's a big part of it, but also then what you can
an abyss of possibility for public rage.
Yeah.
No, well, both that, but then even where that gets channeled to as well.
Because it's one thing to be angry. It's another thing to be like, where do I direct my anger?
What are you angry about?
Right.
And right now I'd say the thing that's directing people or hitting people most directly is the continuing hyperinflation that we have. Which
the Fed just increased the interest rate
half
today.
A point.
Half a point.
Yeah. We're going from Biden inflation to Putin inflation, or it was transitory inflation. But the point is that those numbers are going to just keep going up. And as the physical economy degrades, as we hit certain food shortages, as the bread baskets of Russia and Ukraine are both taken down throughout this conflict and the following sanctions.
And when you say the bread baskets, you mean like the wheat production?
Yeah, I think it's about 40% of wheat production globally, but it's split between
Ukraine and Russia.
And
how much fertilizer?
Depends on if you're talking about which ingredients, but even on like the lowest level, at just the potash ingredient, I think is 30% from either Russia or so that Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus combination.
So people need to realize this, that in the moment that Russia invades, they're not calling it a war. It's a military operation.
I heard the other day that Putin was talking about officially declaring war.
No. Well, I don't know, but the Kremlin just came out, I think, today and said we are not declaring war on May 8th or 7th or something like that.
Well, the thing is, the war has been going on since 2014, especially if you're looking at the Donbass regions in eastern Ukraine. Apart from the expansion of NATO, you also have the lack of the implementation of the Minsk Accords, which came about, the first one in 2014, the second one in 2015. And this was hashed out in Minsk with France and Germany as sort of the mediating factors at the time, the people who are supposed to make sure it was implemented, and how to make sure that the deal was these two breakaway republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk in eastern Ukraine, would formally be brought back within Ukraine's territory, but given some certain like autonomous privileges to them. And I think Putin, that was one of his demands. It's like we need those two places to be kind of independent, sovereign a little bit. Yeah, they can still be under Ukraine, but they need to stop. You need to stop shelling them with artillery. Is sort of the main thing. Okay, so wait. So
The Donbass region is Eastern Ukraine in
Eastern
essence.
Ukraine, and
Eastern
it's
Ukraine.
Russian-speaking people for the most part.
30 years ago, it was Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So 30 years ago, I was 10. I lived in Clark Summit. Not a lot has changed. If all of a sudden I'm in a different state or country, I'm still going to consider myself as a Clark Summit, Pennsylvania American. What I don't think people understand that is that in the Donbass region, and what the other thing they don't understand is it true that the Western Ukrainians have killed 14 to 16,000 civilians in the Donbass region over the last 6 years.
Why were they shelling them?
Because I'd say that's the strong neo-Nazi element that has certain leverages within the Ukrainian government ever since the coup.
Okay,
So this isn't
not skate past that.
So
one.
this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is like the right,
show you the
the right.
documentation.
What's it? The right
Right
brigade,
sector,
or the right
the
sector,
Azov battalion.
battalion.
I think the Eider battalion is another one.
Explain the history of them real quick, if you can. They came from Nazi Germany.
They're followers of Stepan Bandera, who's been horrifically rehabilitated in some mainstream Western spaces, who started out as a collaborator of Hitler, and then they kind of got into little disagreements towards the end, and so then was sort of a marginalized, like more Ukrainian neo-Nazi faction. But
One of the biggest atrocities against Jews was in Ukraine, correct?
yeah, and then we can talk about the memorial. I forget exactly how you call it, but there's a certain memorial to, I think it was upwards of 30,000 Jews were
Over like 3 days.
over 2 or 3 days. Yeah, in a mass killing. And
Was this during World War II?
Yes.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah, the Nazi atrocities weren't just in Germany
far
or
from it,
Poland.
yeah. But to go back to the first question is, I think something you can highlight or that speaks to me the most is that Zelensky was elected as a peace candidate.
Mhm.
Zelensky ran on implementing the Minsk Accords. Zelensky ran on a general ceasefire, on figuring out as a negotiator, as a diplomat. Okay, how do we just
Like a general
get past
ceasefire
this?
against Donbass.
Of yeah, and let's for all sides
Just
to a certain way.
peace.
Yeah, let's figure something out.
Yeah.
You can see the certain leaders of both the right sector and then a certain like neo-Nazi gang element that has its own certain autonomy within Ukraine. They talk explicitly about and gave public statements when Zelensky was attempting to implement this. It would be the one paraphrasing is tantamount to, well, Zelensky says he's willing to face, getting voted out. He's willing to face, low opinion polls if he implements these things. But what he doesn't know is he's going to be hanging from a tree in the main square if he at all ratchets down current operations in the Donbass. If he cedes any territory, if he turns back the clock on the revolution at all. You have literal death threats. On the one article I sent you has them quoted in depth, and even he had a representative who was going towards a conference with Germany and France to talk about how this was to be implemented, and he got assaulted in public through there. Basically, it was the threat of a Maidan coup 2 would happen if anything of the Minsk Accords was implemented, and I think you can see it as the main reason that they weren't, especially since Zelensky ran on that.
So let me get this straight, because you're far more intelligent than I am, right? So Zelensky was trying to get peace. There's a faction now. These groups are actually in the government too, like they have seats in parliament. They are not just like a bunch of dudes.
Well,
like
the militia
bikers for
became part
Trump.
of the National Guard.
You
Yeah,
know, they're not just like driving around on bikes, being like, we'll fuck you up. They're in the government. Like they help make policy.
So they actually hold seats of power.
They hold seats of power in the government.
Well, especially then how they were made a formal part of the National Guard as well, that battalion.
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yes.
The Azov battalion became a formal part of Ukraine's National Guard.
If you look up the NPR at the very beginning of this war, were sharing photos of the Azov battalion, and they had to remove them immediately because obviously the patches that they wear are very apparent what side they're on or whatever ideology they follow. They are Nazis. There's no two ways about it.
Okay.
It's the equivalent of the American government having the Ku Klux Klan battalion.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent. Is that appropriate?
Absolutely, yeah.
What's this? Oh, the Azov battalion. Damn,
Yeah.
brings it up. Thanks, Jamie.
And you could even see articles in NPR, CNN, MSNBC just a few years
Prior
ago talking
to the
about
invasion.
the Nazi problem in
Yeah.
Ukraine. But this
The
is
Azov,
called,
the Azov
Dan, bring that
battalion.
up on the main screen.
The Azov battalion. The Azov battalion was actually not allowed to be on social media. But when Russia invaded,
Yeah.
Facebook let them back on.
What?
Yeah, look at these guys. Dan, can you scroll down
This
to
is
the
real.
history of it? This is real. This is totally real.
If we can believe
Wait, hold on.
Wikipedia.
Stop. The Consolidated Appropriations Act 2018, passed by the United States Congress, blocked military aid to Azov due to its white supremacist ideology. In 2015, a similar ban had been overturned by Congress. Members of the battalion came from 22 countries and are of various backgrounds. In 2017, the size of the regiment was estimated at more than 2,500 members, but was estimated to be 900 members in 2022. Can you scroll down to see if there's anything that has to do with like human rights violations? Number 3. See that? Human rights violations and war crimes? Reports published by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights have connected the Azov battalion to war crimes such as mass looting, unlawful detention, and torture. Stated that the organization had collected detailed information about the conduct of hostilities by Ukrainian armed forces in the Azov regiment in and around, name it, Mariupol. From the summer of 2014 to date, mass looting of civilian homes was documented, as well as targeting of civilian areas between September 2014 and February 2015. A report from January 2015 stated from a Donetsk Republic supporter was detained and tortured with electricity and waterboarding and struck repeatedly on his genitals, which resulted in his confessing of spying for pro-Russian militants. You can take that down now.
So they're part of essentially the Ukrainian National Guard.
They're the tip of the spear in the eastern Donbass, and have been.
They're the
for
ones that
years.
they're the ones that are doing the fighting in Mariupol. They're the ones that are holed up in the steel factory.
Yeah.
That's the Azov
Potentially
battalion,
some NATO commanders with them.
which is terrifying.
Jeez.
And Russia today just bombed the shit out of it. Did you see it?
I didn't see any specific video from today.
Yeah, now they have like DJI drones up there taking videos of whatever they're going to bomb. It's absolutely insane.
It's so funny to watch the reaction here in the U.S. because the same people that have been calling everybody on the opposite political aisle Nazis for the past 6 years are the people supporting actual, literal, avowed Nazis.
Well, if you subscribe to a theory of patronage politics at all, the idea that I think that's how politics works when it's degraded, and it's mostly degraded these days. But you reward your supporters, that sort of thing. Joe Biden's been absolutely the most remarkable candidate for Richard Spencer, who formally endorsed him in 2020. And put the whole Biden thing on Twitter with him.
Why do I know Richard Spencer?
Richard Spencer? Well, yeah.
I know who that is.
Yeah. He is, at least media-wise, mostly put as one of the leaders of the American white nationalist movement. Of the American white nationalist movement. It was attempted to be strongly tied with Trump. There's a video of like an Antifa member like punching him in the face and being like, "Oh, this is what you do with Nazis." And then in 2020, he came out or he supported Joe Biden formally. And
I didn't know this.
Yeah, no, and he's probably had the best election anybody's had in decades, I'd say, at least.
Joe Biden?
No, Richard Spencer. He got the bang for his buck with his vote. Absolutely. The ties you see between the American, like the literal American Nazi movement, and the Ukrainian Nazi movement are strong. These are people who have been supported. If you look at sort of the internal rhetoric of the actual American Nazi and far right, not just the sort of nominal one that will be politically used to try and put on as a tag to somebody. This is what's been kind of hoped for a while, that you could have this sort of just explicit sort of state endorsement of something like this. And the sort of controversies are still, you can see them pop up every now and then when Zelensky spoke to the Greek parliament and he had an Azov member with him, and Greece was also occupied by the Nazis, and there was an uproar in parliament. Certain people just left the building during this video presentation. As well, there were condemnations from Israel prior, I believe, to the military engagement about Azov's influence and about the legacy of Stepan Bandera and his influence upon those regiments. But the details get a little stronger than that too, because especially if you're talking about the negotiations that were attempted right at the beginning of the war, of the invasion, however you want to call it. I don't know if you remember where there's a certain member of Ukraine's negotiation team that was found in the street, just basically executed.
Yes,
one morning.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the formal story was, he had resisted arrest, and he had been a Russian traitor and resisted arrest, and so had to be, his body had to be left in the street, execution style, but even stronger than that. And I have the article in front of me because I'm not the most well versed in it. But if you're talking about,
oh God, Jake, Cade,
yeah.
You're not well versed in something. Holy shit!
Because I don't know, maybe I could try and send this one to you as well. But there's a certain American Canadian couple, Dr. Ulana Supron and her husband Marco, where they have strong involvement with, let me see the best way to phrase this. There was a former head of the SBU, which is kind of the secret services of Ukraine, the Ukrainian KGB, however you want to put it. And they were the ones who executed that negotiator. And there's this former head who, there's video that came out where he was stopped in a traffic stop, and he was more sort of SBU cars came around him, and then basically from all sides he was riddled with bullets. And
that sounds like an assassination.
Yeah. And this was shortly after Russia produced those documents talking about the biological labs within Ukraine and how they were tracking certain birds with migratory patterns into Russia, and there were certain experiments done with avian flu within those labs that Victoria Nuland said is purely for defensive purposes.
Did you know this?
No.
Yeah, the Ukrainian biolabs were actually, now they found info that they were trying to do this. So what they were basically trying to do was, give. God bless you, Dan.
Thank you. That's some of that Ukrainian flu.
Yeah.
So what they were trying to do was actually infect birds with viruses and just let them fly east.
Let
them fly east, which is no different than how the Germans would chlorine gas people in World War I. They would wait for the wind to blow. They would pull the caps off the top of the chlorine and just let the wind take it there. It's not a crazy idea of warfare. You're like, oh, nobody's going to get birds to do that. Man, they would just open tanks and just let that stuff roll through. And the Russians, they have a national security to worry about too. I'm not like, the scary thing is like in the climate in the United States today, if you go, hey, Russia has been saying for 30 years, fuck around and find out, right? But if you say that immediately, I must have dinner with Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, you got to check for rubles in your bank account.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I don't, and that's a crazy thing to have to be like, there's no nuance there. It's either bad or good, or you're evil, or we're great.
Well, and sometimes it could just be one bad guy attacking another bad guy. And maybe we should just stay out of it and let them do what they're going to do.
Well, and that's even,
but we can't because we have interest in the Ukraine.
But also
there's a lot at stake there.
Well, if you're even talking about something like an American think tank entity like the LaRouche Organization or Schiller Institute, our position isn't like drop more bombs or something like that. Like it is focused on something like an actual what a positive peace would be in the situation. But right now that really can't happen, as far as even while Ukraine is having attrition in their actual armed services, we're I think sent a third of our Javelin missiles over to Ukraine, and you have this constant supply of weapons being sent from NATO countries, and from what I know, they're not purely donated either. There's certain sort of reimbursement plans that are supposed to be in the future. So, we got another client. We got another indebted client for the next 20, 30 years, potentially, at least on the books, if the global
United States
lasts that long. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why some of our focus in an organizing sense has been on sort of trying to revitalize or help revitalize the sort of non-aligned movement between these two major blocks. That's why in our last conference, which on what would it take to implement a new security and development architecture globally, in addition to Russian ambassador to the U.S., Anatoly Antonov, we had members of who was a former member of Mandela's government. We had diplomats from India. We had a nuclear advocate for of a general African electrification program. A lot of big words. It's okay to stumble every now and again. But we're kind of taking a look at the spirit of the Bandung conference, which occurred in Indonesia, I believe in the 50s under Sukarno, which the idea was that we need the sort of non-aligned nations, not to just try and further polarize between the Western and the Soviet blocs, but to even try and take a forefront on what a new global image beyond that sort of block mentality would be. And I think that's the sort of exciting thing that we did see coming from Imran Khan's government, and still what he's continuing to do with his public support and calling for new elections and a few pockets of things elsewhere. I think globally there's an understanding that the Western financial system is at a bit of an end point even of what it can potentially do, or what it's tried to do since the Nixon shock in the 70s.
So when you say Western finance, what is that for people who aren't like?
Yeah.
Should there be alarm bells going off for what people think what money is?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If they haven't been already.
Because I think a lot of people are like, I just Venmo'd you.
Yeah, no. And it gets to be more than just gas prices as well. If people are going to the grocery, you see food prices, you can see manufacturing prices, housing prices, car prices.
PP&L just went up like
25%.
No, it was, I think 38%.
I think water as well went up. You can get like a used car
Gas
from mid 2000s might cost like $16,000 right now. This is indicative of a 50-year process going back to 1971, the Nixon shock, to say the least, where physical manufacturing within the Western economies especially has been not only just outsourced, but then completely ripped up internally. There's no real concept of domestic manufacturing. And that's at a bit of a loggerheads with what's going on in Russia in their manufacturing, especially in their ballistic manufacturing, but generally as well. And then what China is doing with the Belt and Road Initiative. The only sort of play that the Western economies has is at this point become literal theft. And what I was talking about last time, you have it's something of a pittance on a global scale, but not totally, the $8 billion from the Afghan central bank at the time that was frozen. And then you saw Biden saying how it would be distributed through, one would go to the 9/11 victims funds, but then basically the rest of it would go to various NGOs, which form a strong sort of bedrock of these financial dynamics. But then also it was $300 billion of Russian assets have been frozen since the beginning of the engagements in Ukraine. There's only so much more Western finance capital can kind of just keep pushing the ball down the line of their own debts and their own lack of producing physical value through their economies. And one person who knows this intimately is Sergey Gloziav, who was a financial advisor to Putin's presidential cabinet, I believe from 2012 to 2019. Since
we're not going to hold you to this.
Yeah. Since 2019, he's been the commissioner of the sort of Eurasian Economic Council. But he was in the United States, I believe, in the 90s, and heard about the LaRouche movement and studied LaRouche in depth. We published one of his books called Genocide, which documented the details of the Yeltsin years and post the fall of the Soviet Union and what actually happened to the population of Russia at that time. He even wrote a eulogy for LaRouche on his death in 2019. And his proposals are coming more and more in play, both with how Russia is aligning with China to try and basically build up a secondary finance system globally if both of them get kicked off SWIFT. If we further our provocations in Taiwan, which is going to be the exact same playbook as Ukraine, you'll see that sort of play out within the next 6 months to the next year.
You think Taiwan's going to be in the next 6 months to a year?
If you go by the Rand papers, that seems to be the direction they're going toward.
Because it seems like China's like, I think we can do this. I think we can go over there and nobody's really going to do anything.
Well, that's what I guess.
Well, I think they've seen the example of
Afghanistan.
But that's also what I guess not exactly what Lindsey Graham is thinking when he's going over in an unannounced visit to Taiwan.
You mean Lindsey Beauregard Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Never been married, nothing to ask, no questions.
Well, and he and John McCain were two of the major people in Ukraine throughout 2013, 2014, and
I've seen. Have you ever seen videos of those guys over there?
Mm-mm.
Oh, they're at rallies, man. They're speaking to the people. John McCain and Lindsey Graham.
But
trying to rally the troops, right?
I think there's a couple videos of them speaking directly to Azov battalion members as well.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
We don't like Nazis. But sure.
if they're useful.
Yeah.
See, that's what I don't understand a little bit from you guys is with what the Biden administration has done with this attempt of building like NATO 2 with the AUKUS countries within the Pacific
ask us
countries.
questions. Yeah.
No. So why, I don't understand, like, because you seem very skeptical of the sort of Russiagate end of things, which is
what do you mean? Be more specific.
Well, it seems like there's a certain understanding there's a certain understanding that Russia has been used by the media to sort of hystericize all the people nominally on the Democratic side or on the left as these sort of big baddies behind the scenes who are controlling everything.
Yep.
And like, they stole the 2016 election. Like Trump's just a front man for Russia. He's, Putin's little butt buddy or whatever, however they want to call it. And then, 2020 comes around and, there's a certain narrative about China, and it seems like you guys kind of endorse that a little bit. It's like, China stole the 2020 election. Biden's just a front man for China. Like that.
I don't think that.
That wasn't us.
Okay,
that wasn't us.
Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump doesn't care about China.
Okay, yeah.
Donald Trump.
No, I don't.
China is asshole.
I don't think that.
To Donald Trump.
I actually said this literally to somebody today because earlier today I was kind of at an election board meeting for Lackawanna County, and
I was jaw on the floor.
I was kind of outside, half listening, half talking to somebody else. And I said, listen, here's my take on it all is for 4 years, we heard about Russian collusion and Trump. Okay. And then it turned out, and they tried to impeach a president over it. Turned out
over him not giving aid to Ukraine.
They tried to impeach him over Russia.
Yeah.
Couldn't make a take. And then they actually did impeach him over a bad phone call that was perfect with Ukraine. They tried saying it jokingly.
Yeah.
Well, they did impeach him. They just didn't remove him.
Have you forgotten about the second impeachment?
Well, that was over January 6th. So
had nothing to do with it.
So but for 4 years we heard about Russian collusion.
Yeah.
And Russia was the big bad boogeyman. Turned out to not be true. In fact, if there was any collusion, it actually looks like Hillary Clinton was involved, not Donald Trump.
Hold on. Who did the investigation on Russian collusion?
I don't remember.
Robert Mueller.
Okay. Do you know who else Robert Mueller investigated?
Lyndon LaRouche.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
So, and that happened for 4 years. And then fast forward, Trump Biden. And then immediately what you hear is voter fraud. And, that's being blamed on whoever. I don't know if I heard at one point like there was some China stuff, but that really never took, I never gave that any attention. So, and so fast forward today, we're at this meeting and they're talking about drop boxes in Lackawanna County. There's video evidence of a guy with at least a dozen ballots that he put into a drop box. And literally the local district attorney's office was like, that's not a crime. We're not going to prosecute it. It's literally a crime. Like it's against the law. It's voter fraud. And it's on video. You have a guest we had on a few weeks ago, ex-CIA. He talked about how literally 200,000 more votes were counted than ballots cast in Pennsylvania in the last presidential election. That's not controversial. That's not a conspiracy theory. It just is. 70,000 mail-in ballots with no signatures. All of these things. And my takeaway from that today and what I communicated to everybody was if we don't figure this out, we're in serious trouble. Like serious trouble.
How does that have to do with China?
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with China, but what it has to do with is the direction of global politics, with America being kind of the military spearhead of that. When you look at what's going on with China and Taiwan right now, you look what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine right now. We can't even figure out how to get our pants on right in the morning here in America. Like the very basics of voting, elections, all of those things. And yet we want to complain about, China can't go and do this in Taiwan. Yet we've been policing the world for the better half of a century. It's like this weird kind of double standard, double speak. So, like as far as asking about like Russia, boogeyman, left versus right, to me, it just kind of seems like what you were saying is we've always needed conflict in the world. That's what keeps America going.
Or the illusion of it.
The illusion of it. And, look at what's happening right now with, like you're saying, inflation. And I think Biden just announced another $33 billion going to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like what in the world are we doing? We're already in trouble. Why are we doing more?
I'm still curious about the China question towards us.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. Maybe let me just naively ask: what's the China is asshole? What's the?
Okay,
I've never heard it.
Dan,
what even is China?
Dan, you want to take care of this?
I think I have this one like almost bookmarked about it.
We will show you.
Yeah, we will show you.
Yeah.
It's not because we think. I don't think China's good by any stretch. but it's not because we think that there was like some big Joe Biden China connection.
I think there's a bigger Joe Biden Ukraine connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that there's a business connection, but I mean, if you're in global business, you have connections with China. Trump had it, Biden had it, everybody has it.
So my opinion on China is, I'm not the guy who's I'm going to deep dive fucking Chinese history. I know that they've invested heavily in our education system. I know that they've invested.
At least somebody is.
I agree with you. Yeah. But why? It seems like countries would want to invest in their own education system. And I mean like higher learning, Hollywood, they have a lot of money there, investments, tech. There is an issue about IP theft. That is a legit thing, which is, an entrepreneur in America who has an idea and
these TikToks
meets with the Chinese, and they take that idea over there and they say, go fuck yourself. We're going to make what we're going to make. We're going to make it on the cheap, and we're going to sell it for what you were going to sell it. People get pissed off about stuff like that.
All right, Dan, put it up there.
Here we go.
Hong Kong no more to stand with China. We need independence.
Yep. And what's your message to? Have you seen Donald Trump? Do you think he should step in?
Donald Trump don't trust China. China is asshole.
That's the only reason it's up there.
That's the only reason it's up there, because
it is not of substance, Cade.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. It's just really funny.
No, but kind of.
I have. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just for me to finish. I have my concerns. I have my concerns about it, what it means. I have recently, over the last 2 years, kind of discovered what it actually. I'm doing my best to rediscover America. I don't know if you think that America has been always flawed. I just think that there's some certain things that were from the start that are very sacred and sacrosanct that shouldn't be persuaded. One of them is freedom of speech. I'm a big proponent of freedom of speech. I think, and when I hear about companies or individuals who have received money from China, whether it's through campaigns or received money from China, whether it's stocks, when you have a lot of stocks, you have a lot of power, regardless of what anybody thinks. You're going to have a seat at the table, and you're going to have a say, an influence, so to say. That's where I have a concern with China. I don't see that so much with Russia. I think China is probably, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, China is probably the superpower, and I think it's hard for Americans to even acquiesce to that possibility, whether it's economic, military, societal. I just have issues with the conforming of society. That's where, because I think everybody's brain is sovereign. You should be able to do whatever you want to do, and nobody should be able to hinder that. The problems with the rest of the world, we can all figure that out together. That's my point of view. I don't know if you disagree, but if you do, I'd like to hear why.
In principle, it's exactly the same. Both with the sort of sacrosanct origins of the United States. That's a huge plank of the entirety of the LaRouche position, and then also in the sovereignty of the individual mind.
Those are my two big ones.
Yeah, and I'd say with whatever nominal freedoms you want to say there are in the left, the actual development of the sovereign individual mind is something being done in their educational system a lot better in China right now. Because, the mind is not something that springs up from the ground fully formed. It's absolutely dependent upon its education and its culture. And
I think language. I think language is the thing that gives you, I think, therefore I am, right? So if you don't have language, you'll never understand the concept of that. Strange thing about countries over there, if you ask like a North Korean, if you ever fucking meet one and they get out of there and you ask them what love means, they don't know what it means. So it's not in their language.
I'm skeptical of that claim. That there's not a word for love. In
North Korea, in Korean,
because it's still Korean, right? Like I'm sure there's some a certain kind of dialect that's formed.
See, I mean, at some point, that country free thought and free will are that's a thing in that country that don't really look kindly on.
I'm not North Korea, but I'd say let's look at our own house kind of first though. What's your real metric for that? What's your baseline that you're thinking of for that? Like what?
I at least know that I'm miserable here.
You're not. You're the happiest boy alive.
I'm not. No one ever is. Like everyone who's like shitting rainbows. But I'm also one of those people who's willing to hear that if I'm wrong.
Well, and I guess that sort of.
I hope we're not going to try to convince me that North Korea is utopia.
No, I think what I'm more thinking of is what seems like the flank here is the certain conviction that to acknowledge a sort of state of despair is far from the height of the capacity of the human mind, and that actually there's a certain sort of principled potential with
they might be happy as shit over there with little that they know. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to even keep the focus to here a little bit
in the States,
like even within
or in this
within the States, within this coffee table, within with what's going on in your head right now, even a little bit, where because I know it's a bit of an ironic reference that you're doing, but if that really is your benchmark of the freedom of your mind is just to be able to acknowledge the sort of degradation that it's in.
I think it's a good start.
I'd like to offer maybe an alternative there.
I think the awareness of the situation is obviously it's more powerful than not being aware of it.
Well, because that's a trouble I'd say even we have as an organization is having with some of different other factions that we work with is there's certain people that's very much the limit of their thinking, and they even sort of imagine, well,
so you think I'm being mildly myopic?
A little bit, yeah. Well,
okay.
Well, and understandably,
well, then expand me.
Yeah. I think if you
let me, first of all, what's the baseline of what we're talking about? If you're going to expand my myopicism, myopicness,
myopathy,
is that what it is?
That's totally wrong.
Yeah.
What are we talking about specifically
what can be done right now? And what can a human mind achieve right now on an individual level, and then it's the same principle that expands to what can be done globally. Because that's also, though we've done a lot of reporting on the Ukraine-Russia situation, it's not from us. We don't see it as a doom and gloom affair. You need to understand the atrocities that have occurred, and you need to understand the brink of further atrocity that we're on. But all that kind of just becomes noise if you don't have a sort of position of principle that allows you to really see what the potential still of the moment is, even in the worst sort of moments. Even if you look to American history, I like to think a lot about like the other Pennsylvania president, James Buchanan, and the total
president from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
We don't really want to brag about him either.
Why does Pennsylvania always create like these people? Like we've had two attorney generals from Lackawanna County who both went to jail. The only two we've ever had. They both went to jail.
We have the guy that wrote Rocky though.
What's his name?
The Italian Stallion.
There you go. There you go. Okay, keep going. Did I lose you? I'm sorry.
Not
I'm
totally,
sorry.
but the idea being that
the basis of like I think you think
maybe
I'm coming from the wrong place.
Yeah,
James
like
okay.
We're maybe on the closest to the brink of actual thermonuclear war, and what could be best described as maybe total extinction of the human race, as maybe we've been as a species, which is I'd say a truth of the situation. It's also reflective of like what our capacities.
Do you think it's closer right now than in the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, and people know it less
significantly,
so much more so because
you think we're more closer to nuclear war right now?
We're on the other side of it. This has been a Cuban Missile Crisis for Russia starting out. That's basically how this started. It was their Cuban Missile Crisis, and there was no Kennedy to step in on either side. There was no point of common sense sanity in order to de-escalate from that.
I never looked at it that way.
Especially with the strategic situation when you're talking about this sort of ballistic advantage in Russia, we are not as terrible as mutually assured destruction was, which was already in infinite time was going to tend towards nuclear annihilation of the planet. We're in a worse position now because that's not really the functioning as much as it was before. And so here's a space where I think I can talk about potential, though, because one of the major LaRouche's initiatives with Reagan was the Strategic Defense Initiative.
Is it Star Wars?
Star Wars, yeah. Beam the bomb was another phase for it. And this is something he was writing about in the late 70s, the necessity to use cutting edge technologies to develop.
Did that turn into the Iron Dome? In
you
a
mentioned
sense,
this last time too. I think there might have been some sort of.
I think some of that tech,
some overlap.
To a certain degree.
Okay.
But at that point in time, LaRouche had back channels with the Soviet Union, and the proposal was the United States and the Soviet Union will work together to develop a certain technology that was at the limit of technology and would form a flank upon any sort of nuclear attack. That it would be a shared platform. That if any nuclear weapon were were launched, it would be known across all sides. Well, just on a technological level, this won't come to fruition. This will be shot down, and it's a shared technology. It's a shared platform. The Soviets didn't take up that offer. LaRouche predicted that if they did not, they would collapse within about 5 years. I think he was 3 months off of the time frame that he set. And because
that's how late that was in the conversation, was before the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Okay. And because it goes back to, this is why I think it's important to keep going back to the totality of the global situation. It's with every one of these myopic minutia topics,
these little
you
these
get
little
fed
parts
into
to the
left
whole.
and right. Every new Twitter item of the day.
Okay.
The whole point is just to keep segmenting you from one thing to the next, and you never really develop an actual comprehensive
10,000-foot
conception
overview.
of what's the
now I see
composition
it.
of what's going
Right.
on
Okay.
here. And that's what LaRouche had in the 80s with the proposal of the SDI, where he was able to make the forecast of what would happen with the Soviet Union, because it goes back to the principle that he was able to see that their manufacturing sector wasn't producing any new physical breakthroughs that would then be able to push their economy beyond just the sort of entropic falling back of what inevitably happens if you just stay at your same level of science and technology, and that this, since it was on the cutting edge and be a shared development, would be able to be then generalized to their entire manufacturing sector and actually give them basically a productive economy.
So he saw it like plateau.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called a flank. You can use, there's certain allusions to Riemannian manifolds that are appropriate, but not appropriate for this conversation. But the idea would be that there was, and that's how he was able to sell to Reagan. It's like either they will agree to work with us in this, that will end the Cold War, or they won't. Their economy will collapse, and that will end the Cold War. That's how he was able to sell it to Reagan. But the problem in the current moment is, since Russia has invested in these MHD hypersonic missiles, let's say hypothetically you were able to get an agreement to try and implement SDI right now, it couldn't work in the same form because the missiles move faster than the lasers could lock onto them, then you could register them and lock onto it. So you could look at that and you'd be like, oh, we had this chance in the 80s and now that's gone. And now, well, we're just in this, cataclysmic, we're just going to wait until whatever accident or psychotic sets this off. Yeah. But that's where it's sort of this necessity of getting the principled position, that idea of acquiring the flank of the situation, the principle behind the SDI, that can be implemented now as well. But it requires what we haven't had in a few decades, to say the least. You'd need a breakthrough on the level of physical principle, on what can we do physically within the universe, which is the sort of thing that's done when you get Planck and Einstein, and suddenly your machine tools, what you use to cut metals, isn't just, grinders and metal on metal. You're able to use laser cutting machine tools. The problem is we're kind of several generations past when that moment's happened. And I think just as in an ambient way, nobody really believes in that anymore. Nobody really believes that, it might be in some sort of far off sci-fi Gnostic way, imagine like, oh, well, somebody out there, something, they'll create something that makes things faster or better or something like that. But the idea that there will be a fundamental shift in what we can do physically, that then generalizes to the entirety of both our economic and political, diplomatic, and even cultural situations. There's been no real experience with that for 3 or 4 or 5 generations.
Elon Musk could have done it, but instead he bought Twitter. You okay over there, Dad?
Isn't it nice to be around
That
assholes?
one really got me. It's a lot better than an It reference.
That's another kind of prime example, though, because, he is somebody who does have at least some sense of what manufacturing is, and it puts him a little bit of
I think he
heads and
employs
shoulders
like
above
200,000 people.
Yeah, no, and that's a real thing to be working with. But at the same time, these aren't breakthrough physical principle technologies. And that's the sort of difficulty in even communicating this somewhat, is having the knowledge of the necessity of that to have any sort of effective political program, and not to just be in a degraded sort of politicking kind of state.
So in other words, to almost have like the political foresight to be like, this is something we should really be exploring, and we should not neglect, and we should pay attention to it, because otherwise somebody else will, or somebody's doing it right now.
Well, and this is why last time I was talking about referring to China as the American system with Chinese characteristics, because this is what I would say is even in arguably the prime sacrosanct thing about America as an entity is that in its founding, you have the reports on manufacturers by Alexander Hamilton. You have the war economy built up by Hamilton, then the post-war economy that focused on this domestic manufacturing and breakthroughs in manufacturing, and that was the inception of the nation as a real force.
We build
globally.
stuff.
Yeah, no. And then beyond that, you have Henry Carey, who was the secretary to Lincoln, basically Lincoln's main financial guy, who developed the greenbacks policy, who built up even I think our credit had been cut off from Europe going into the Civil War, and was able to build kind of from the ground up the necessary manufacturing potentials to actually win the Civil War, and then produce the post-war basically the miracle that occurred afterward, which was encapsulated in the 1876 centennial fair that Henry Carey organized. And it's the same sort of thing that happened under FDR in the New Deal, and it's what Kennedy tried to do with the Apollo program. And further than that, there is a implicit tradition of this kind of breakthrough manufacturing uniquely within American history. And there are nations that are aware of that and implementing that, like China, and I'd say right now, like Russia to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as that's, and this is where it gets even metaphysical a little bit, like as far as you're not implementing implementing that kind of policy, you are on a downslide. Your total physical economy, which will include your education, your culture, your manufacturing, your health and sustainability, that is all just going to fall to attrition until there is something else bringing in that kind of breakthrough. And this is the primary focus of LaRouche's work throughout the decades that he was let's say an active scholar and organizer on this level, was analyzing these trends throughout history and in the current moment, and seeing what produced these breakthroughs and where did these downsides occur. And that's where his method of forecast would develop from.
Seeing what we weren't doing
or what was being done elsewhere.
And basically, as long as we're not at the forefront of technology, invention, all the above, we're sliding down the pecking order of world power.
It's not even from a certain perspective, but it's not even a pecking order type of thing, because the best situation would be having some sort of like the Peace of Westphalia is what we reach back towards as our model for this global security and development architecture.
Westphalia. Oh, Peace of Westphalia.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was after the 30 Years' War as the conclusion. It was basically realized on all sides. It's like, well, whoever wins this isn't even going to win, because it's creating such a cataclysm that there won't be anything to have won at the end of it, which is basically what we're in the position we're in now. And like I was referring to, some of the people that we work with that have similar sympathies maybe towards the Russian or the Chinese sides of things, they'll end up in still this kind of like apocalyptic mindset where it's like, we gotta really support them, because the only thing that'll bring about something different will be the downfall of America, will be the downfall of the United Kingdom, will be the downfall of the Western architecture. Where on the financial end, that's true to a certain degree. But one person who works with us, Jason Ross, at the early start of these engagements in Ukraine, he basically said Putin can't win this, in the sense that this is not something that can be won by military means. If it's limited to that alone, if there's not a larger diplomatic process that occurs, the sort of inertia of the backsliding of the Western economy on a physical level will take the global economy with it. This sort of global hyperinflationary moment is not just the result of machinations of evil people. There's something like that to a certain degree, but it's also like a physical diagnostic of the situation, where you have the like objective health of the global economy in total waning away.
Except for Russia, China.
But there's still a limit of what they can do on their own through their own initiatives. With the even though they don't have like China doesn't have the largest GDP right now, but especially Russia and China together, they I think make up about 2/3 of the actual productive economy of the world. Compared to, at least it's a big gap between them and the US in terms of productive capacity.
Russia's faring pretty well right now.
If you're talking about
economically.
If you're talking like the ruble dollar
Yes.
sort of relationship,
Yes.
yeah. And the further they go in a sort of physical economic direction, like people like Sergey Gloziav has been pushing them towards, the better chance that they have. But it's not a good looking picture if the United States just stays on the other side of the block of that, and even more so just becomes the sort of antagonizer of the Russian and Chinese situation, because it's not even so much that they can't create something on their own. It's that the antagonistic forces of Anglo-American finance capital literally would prefer nuclear annihilation to the ending of the system.
Wait, so instead of like they don't want to get caught, they don't want to get caught that it fell apart and they screwed it up. They want nuclear war to just be like.
I don't know if it's a matter of.
Am I not understanding that right?
No. That's a certain aspect of it, but it's
the way we don't get caught is nuclear war.
I wouldn't say it's that direct. That's maybe an aspect of it, but it's more so that it's a sort of strange love idea of where, well, maybe through first strike, maybe through a certain tactical usage of nuclear weapons, you can. That's basically the only option that these financial forces have within the West. If you go to the end point of the current dynamic, because if you just see the strength of the ruble and the strength of the Chinese economy increase, the sort of geopolitical perspective has it axiomatically, you can't have another regional hegemon. There can't be another superpower, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. The whole game is predominated upon Anglo-American dominance within the entirety of the situation, and it's basically that there isn't a game worth playing outside of that. So so the same way that I'd say we're supporting Nazi forces within Ukraine right now, I think it's very indicative of the sort of architecture behind the scenes of what principally on a moral level, on a strategic level, is the thinking behind the scenes in Anglo-American governance generally. That there is not a moral fitness within Western politics at all these days. With what you see in the stealing of funds from Afghanistan and the starvation over the winter and what's continuing to worsen, in what you see towards the incitement of warfare throughout Eastern Europe and the Middle East and increasingly more into Eastern Asia as well. The prognosis of the moral fitness of the West is very
Unhealthy.
Yeah, at the moment, and that will tend towards a strongly cataclysmic ending without something from the West itself sort of reversing that course, which we have done before. It's why I briefly mentioned Buchanan before, because that was a terrible point within American history, both culturally and economically, domestically and internationally. But you do have the greenback policy of Lincoln. You have the Lincoln presidency, which is the ship is rightable in a certain way, and from a principled perspective, there. But without something like that, it is a very bleak picture.
How do we do that? Like, what is there? Like, what is the?
It's a 4-point plan, actually.
Oh, is there really?
It's the cheesiest way. Yeah, no,
all these big problems have just been boiled down to a 4-point plan.
A 4-point plan. Yeah.
Okay.
And
eat your vegetables. Don't be mean to your mother.
Yeah. No.
Take your vitamins. Love America.
Yeah.
No. Glass-Steagall, national banking, crash driver fusion program, and crash driver science program generally, and then specifically focusing on fusion energy as
cold fusion. Or any type of fusion.
Any type of fusion, I guess. This was written in 2014 by LaRusso. It was one of it's a short paper, but it was one of the last sort of major works that he put out. And half of it goes through that program, which is part of the petition that we have out right now on building this new security and development architecture. And then half of it just goes into a kind of what this human principle is, going through some of the work of one of his major sources, the Soviet Ukrainian geochemist Vladimir Vernadsky. But the basis of that program is something that you can show throughout the history of America, and principally what's been done outside of that as well, is how you can bring about these sort of breakthrough events, how you can have a coherent polis actually functioning through a citizenship that's able to have the freedom to interact with their government in a meaningful way, and not just the freedom of sort of of spurious, spontaneous opinion, or of a freedom to sort of like harm yourself in the way that you want to.
Wait, what? Like, okay, so explain this to me again. The last like 2 sentences.
Well, because if we're talking about sort of what freedom is on a certain level,
Right.
like you could say, well, freedom is the freedom to do whatever just comes to your mind, and whether you can do that or not. You can even go to a certain libertarian ethos where it's like, well, you can freedom
Well, that
is.
seems like the freedom to go like spelunking instead of like the freedom to think what you want and be able to say what you say.
Mhm.
Like that to me is freedom.
Mhm.
Going to, see the Yosemite State Park, that's a luxury.
But do you feel like you have a freedom right now in your life to like positively affect in a major way the state of your cultural condition, the state of your political condition?
I think I have a positive effect right now to hopefully affect the people around me.
I guess even
but
in
having
the explicit interaction
having-
with your government right now, do you feel like you have not just an effective voice, but an effective means of actions to
I
help
plead the
bring
fifth
about
on
the
this one.
general-
I think you're
No.
looking at like a macro level, and we kind of look at it as a more micro level, where we're kind of thinking, at least for me, I don't think I have any impact on what happens at the state level or anything like that, right? But I can only do my best to do around the people that I interact with in the immediate circles that I live in.
Yeah, no, and this isn't me saying like, oh, you should do more and you can do more. Both of those things are true. It's trying to give like an objective analysis.
I don't think we were taking it as an affront. We were just clarifying.
Of the current situation. Like, what do you feel like the
Whose phone keeps vibrating?
That's mine right here.
Yeah, you
That's
put it under your lap.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the freedom of what's the freedom ingrained within your capacity right now of action in the moment? Which is it's something I would say is different between cultures and between times within history. Like what effectively can you do as an actor for the general good right now? And not just to say like,
I think we're
that's
doing it.
And yeah. But have there been other times maybe where you could do more?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time you can always do more. But I mean, life has to be, managed. I love my wife.
Yeah. No, okay. So
if I had all the money in the world and I would be fucking every day.
This isn't supposed to be a motivational speech to you even for it. It's talking about like, so if you were,
no, I'm talking about intention.
Yeah. But
I intend to do that. I would love to do that.
If you were a commonly educated laborer right now, going through just like the basic curriculum, compare that to if that were the case during Franklin Roosevelt's CCC program and the New Deal. Like, what could you do even just with your labor right now, and what could you do then? Right now, you could maybe, drive people on Uber and split that time with Grubhub half the day, or however you want to do it, shop Instacart for people. If you were part of the CCC back in FDR's New Deal, you could be building large infrastructure, but you could be building roads for people. You could be building transport for people. You could be manufacturing things that people generally need in their economy and need to flourish as people.
That will obviously expand an economy.
Yeah. I'm just talking about even on that most base level scale, what your possibility of effect and action is.
Right.
Even from somebody just in the most Joe Schmo kind of sense.
It's a job that goes towards the greaterment of, right?
Yeah,
Am I understanding that right?
There's like with the general welfare clause in the preamble to the Constitution, there's a way you can contribute to the general welfare, which seems very lacking, I think, these days, apart from maybe even like on a sentimental personal level. And I don't think that's been something that's been popular for a few generations. So it's even something
I've noticed that. Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been, we've come a long way from ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
I thought it was ask what you can do for a Spice Girl.
A lot. But no, that has become the mentality is what is my government going to do for me?
Well, and even from the perspective of the good, I feel like most people
would be what can I give back to my community? It's what are you going to do for me? And that has become the ethos of the past 20 years.
And this isn't even to talk down on somebody with this mindset at all, but I feel like then
you can shit on people.
Well, I feel like the most beneficial mindset that's common these days is something where it's like, well, I got to figure out how to support myself, and I can even help the people that I like, and then I can be good to the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
So if that includes like, if you can get to like a Wall Street job or something like that, if it includes even working in the military industrial complex or something like that, it's like, well, a job's a job, and that's what you have to do, and then you can be good to the people around you. And that's not to shit on the person who feels like that's their only options, but that's kind of a bit of an objective assessment that that's what most people's options are in the United States these days. There's not an option where what you do for a living is something that benefits the public good. I'd say it's a very different case in China right now, that requires even a kind of cultural interaction with it to a certain degree, firsthand and not just through reporting. But that's where I think there's something that we can take through our interaction with China generally, but even just with our interaction with history, with principally what has been possible for a population to be able to do. To what does it mean to be a citizen on the most micro level? What are the potentials of that?
Yeah, it's not just like you get here, get to do what you want and pay taxes. Like, where are the jobs that are, we think of government jobs as that in essence would be a government job in a way, right? Because obviously they're paying for it, right? So if it's infrastructure, if it's roads, if it's bridges, if it's telecommunications, if it's, who fucking knows, submarines.
Well, something with national,
you're working towards a greater whole.
Well, and with national banking too, it's not just like a communistic model. It's something where you can use national credit in order to fund private firms to be doing those things as well.
See, I
give and take there.
I think it eventually comes to a place where all systems are susceptible to psychopaths.
That's why the system is not can never be your starting point. It has to be the sort of principle behind it. That's why you need to get to even something of a metaphysical perspective in order to have the most minute physical effect in a real way. Because this is something that one of the people we study, Friedrich Schiller, in his essays on history, talks about ancient Greece and Solon of Athens and Lycurgus of Sparta and the difference of sort of these ancient Greek systems. The one even he's most favorable of, Solon of Athens, it's not just that, his laws only lasted about 75 years or something like that. It's not like, now we have this model from Solon of Athens and all we need to do is just implement like these rules, these way and that sort of thing. The starting point can't be what's the formalistic thing that works. What are the rules that'll work best, because the capacity of the human individual, of that sovereign mind on the most fundamental level, is to break out into something of a beyond of what the current possibilities are and to determine the further possibilities. And there's no sketched out way to be able to do that in an ABC way.
So are you saying like you almost need a mission statement before you come up with your 10-point plan?
I'd say there's an aspect of that. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay. You need to interact with the idea of what actually the mind is, what actually humanity is. And I know that sounds a little even like hibbity-hoo to go with that.
I'm with you.
Yeah, great.
I'm with you.
Yeah. That there's no just bottom line or brass tacks of a situation. There's certain metrics you can look towards to see what like relative success has been, but there's no formula for it. That goes very literally into LaRouche's sort of philosophy of science, where scientific development isn't something formula based either. You look at a formula as basically the poetics of a breakthrough. The breakthrough happens on a more non-discursive physical level, and then something like a mathematical formula, that's not what encapsulates the essence of the scientific discovery. There's an actual object there that needs to be interacted with. And if you got 10 more hours, I can go into Bertrand Russell and David Hilbert and how their formalization of mathematical science brought about.
But that's a class for college.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
We're a bunch of there's three idiots talking to a smart guy.
Oh, well, no, we can get a reading group getting together.
First of all, I'm not that smart and he's not that dumb.
Yeah.
I like Cade. Don't tell him he's dumb.
I've never coughed in the mic before. I don't know why I just did that.
It was good.
So when you talk about like the metaphysical, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost, let's take it back 2,000 years ago. The communities in the desert. We're not talking about like Istanbul, Constantinople, whatever the fuck that name
Constantinople.
is. Rome. The bigger imperial or empires or whatever they were. We're talking about just a culture trying to survive that has no influence from anyone else, right? There was back then there was a spirituality to and a metaphysical to what they do. It was like a combo between like science and the metaphysical, where it was like some of these intangible things that are the focus to make you.
You had that 500 years ago in the Italian Renaissance too, though.
I was just trying to go back further to show that it's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, that's just human nature. I think just throughout all of human history. It's always been that way.
I think there's been, but so a lot of these things, like the state of where we are, right? A lot of them, you know, there are smart people in the world who kind of shout the warning signs of where this road is going. There are dumb people who are in charge of whatever these things are. I find it hard to believe that this is all just random and fate. And, you know, the universe works in mysterious ways and blah, blah, blah. Some of it seems like a long plan. Some of it seems like some things have been put in place to make sure that certain things didn't happen, and it wasn't just yesterday. Is that a fair assessment of either bureaucracy or political power? Or
I would posit that every fundamental breakthrough on a scientific physical level has only and ever originated from a person that views the world in that way of composition. That's not by accident that something is intelligible to them on a fundamental level. That intelligibility is built in a composed way of the universe. In a theological way. So you go back to Plato's Timaeus dialogue, where the majority of it is this long discursive description where the guy starts out basically saying like, all right, well, if I were God and I were to compose the universe in the best possible way and to get what I see before me now, what would that entail? And he's basically using the full extent of scientific knowledge of the time and getting it within a singular unified picture. That's the same thing that Leibniz does with the calculus. It's the same thing that Kepler does when he produces basically an ordering principle for the solar system. That's the same thing that Einstein does when he's producing general relativity. That's the same thing Planck even does when he's working with the sort of quantum of action. He's got a lot of references towards Leibniz, which his contemporaries at the time sort of disregard and go like, oh, that's where Max Planck, he was being a little, out there, but, we'll use the formalistic stuff. I don't think you can point towards one fundamental breakthrough in science that does not interact with a theological, metaphysical assessment of the universe as something in a composed order. And there's certain spots where you can even go beyond that in a certain way with
So when you say theological, you're not saying like, oh, Christian or Jew or Muslim. It's a what is that?
I think it's something that you see throughout the Abrahamic religions, but it's also something that you see in the Platonic and Socratic approach to what they considered God to be. I think it's something that's the basis of a strong ecumenical tradition throughout religions, which Nicholas of Cusa wrote about in his De Pace Fide, which is a hypothetical dialogue with God about how do we get these different religions to sort of work in a geopolitical way, so to speak. And it seems like something much more of principle than of storytelling. Let's say it's not the sharing of a narrative. It's not even the sharing of a beautiful lie. It's this interaction with the actuality of a principle of composition and seeing the universe itself as a composed whole. And it's a strong.
You're not going to say anything that's going to fucking make us judge you. So,
all right.
Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like the metaphysical structure. What was the other the composition? Like so what is the principle of composition? Like what is in that sentence? What is the composition? Are you talking? Because I keep hearing music in my head.
No, that's a huge part of it as well. There's also, it's not a coincidence that Planck and Einstein were both classical musicians in their own right. It's not a coincidence that Kepler's ordering principle for the solar system worked along a similar level as the musical scale did as well, where the certain intervals between planets had this relation. This is in the Harmonices Mundi. You can look that up on Wikipedia too. The harmonies of the world.
You're kind of alluding to theoretical music. What is the
harmony
phrase?
With the universe?
No. There's something to it. Basically,
it's tough.
You can see God in the science of music.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's tough.
And I can't remember what it's called, but like there is. It's like music theory. There's a science to music. I mean, it's all vibrations, wavelengths. Speaking your words, it's all
energy.
It is what it is. When you pluck a guitar string, it's energy creating vibration, creating noise. But there's a science to the way all of the notes interact and work together, and it's the hum, the vibration. There's a theological aspect to the science of music.
And one of LaRouche's best essays, in my opinion, is Beethoven as a physical scientist.
Yeah.
And it sort of details, if you look at certain compositions from Beethoven, like what exactly is going on in a sense of sort of multiply connected circular action from both like a topological, but then also this sense of principled composition is sort of the catchphrase I guess I'm using right here. But where when you're working with principle, you're outside both of logical deduction. You're outside of both logical deduction of just this sort of like, oh, if you have these categories and these categories, what do they produce? You're also outside of just the sort of positional image space of an experimental laboratory or like a worldview. It's sort of this third level of hypothesis, which Plato referred to as the hypothesis of higher hypothesis, which informs what Leibniz brought about with the principle of sufficient reason or the principle of least action, or I'd say LaRouche's own principle with energy flux density. We don't need to get into necessarily here, but it is a hypothesis where its proving grounds are outside of logical deduction and outside of a direct instance of an experiment. Because something like Leibniz's, let's say, least action, which is that a physical process will fall according to the least action of the moment. How could you necessarily prove that, right? Because it's not like we've seen every possible action of every possible thing, and then you could be like, oh, that's that's least action, that's least action, that's least action. You could disprove it, but how could you necessarily prove that, or how could you prove sufficient reason in a laboratory where if something occurs, there's a reasonable basis to it. LaRouche comes up with a very unique proposal for this like third order of proof. And his idea was the proof for something like that comes in the laboratory setting of the entirety of the physical economy, where if this principle is ascribed to, does it naturally reflect out in let's say the universe in a successful way? So if you have a society built,
does the economy have unassociated positive consequences or reactions from that?
An increase in energy flux density or an accompanying increase in relative potential population density, in the sense that do these produce energy flux density, meaning how much of a resource do you need to get the equivalent output, is one image way to put it. So you need like a ton of wood that equals like 50 pounds of coal that equals like a microgram of uranium or something like that.
Right.
But then also, what's the potential population density that's allowed for with that, with the limits of that energy resource? And there's a couple steps in between there, but that was basically the principle he put forth as a metric for even sort of judging principles of these third order of hypothesis. And I think like a simple way to just imagine it is like, okay,
yeah, do that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are Jesuit missions to China in the 1600s, and they brought back, certain axioms in their culture, and Leibniz saw them, and he saw what their technology was at, and he was like, well, there's a strong ecumenical potential between us and the Confucians, because first of all, you can just see it in what they're able to do. You can see it in their technology. You can see it in the standard of living of their population. So as earlier I was saying, there's no like brass tacks to the situation of X, Y, Z, but there is a kind of metric. You can see what works and you can see what doesn't work. And that itself becomes in the totality a kind of proof for these metaphysical principles. And that's something when you read the original writings of a Kepler, of a Leibniz, of a Coup, of even an Einstein, that's very understood in both implicit and explicit ways. That's why there's such a polemic against the sort of textbook understanding of scientific breakthroughs in LaRouche, because when it's just reduced to the formula, you don't actually get that process of discovery, which itself is a kind of composition, which can't be transmitted in just a formula. Because the same way you're not going to understand the composition of one of Bach's Brandenburg concertos by just seeing like a reduction of it to some sort of categorical form, or even of just looking at the notes of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're very well versed in that sort of composition, you can maybe compose it yourself in your head from looking at the notes.
But he takes all the math and science of the music and then does something really spectacular from that. And you can't teach. It's basically like saying you can't teach someone how to play guitar like Eric Clapton. You can't teach somebody to compose like Bach. No, but you can't
Whoa.
do it. You can.
Wait a minute.
Hey, can we talk about that terrible song he wrote?
Which one?
No, that was Pink Floyd.
Which one?
Oh no, I'm speaking about that one.
What a week, guys.
The Pink Floyd Ukraine song was terrible. But basically, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that there's no way to teach the mindset of how you put together that beautiful music and how you compose it.
You can teach it, but you can't teach it through a textbook. You can't teach someone to play
That's
baseball.
That's
through
what
a
I'm saying.
textbook.
Like,
Yeah.
It's intrinsically like for me to teach that, it would be like, maybe he took a protege or a student and went out and just sat by a lake, and he's like, "You hear that?"
And there are different schools. It's the Partimenti School of Composition. There are different schools of composition that address this topic of composition directly.
That works
But
for anything that you create.
Exactly.
Right?
But it's through a practice of it though, right?
Yeah.
It's through like a physical involvement of the practice of it. There's nothing that you can do just inside of your head.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'd all be, angels still in heaven just thinking through
or
the
we'd be in the
possibilities.
Matrix waiting for Neo to free us. That's all we're doing.
That's the Gnostic side of it for sure.
So over the last 6 months, if you or your organization were to grade, prophesize, or warn or applaud, how do you think the world's doing? Since we last spoke,
generally sliding towards cataclysm with a few wonderfully hopeful moments from select sections of the world here and there.
and these are not just these are select sections of the world, not necessarily saying like it's a superpower or it's the United States.
I think some things from the superpowers have been great. The way that Russia did approach the sanctions, that from certain principles of physical economy, as in some ways informed by Sergey Gloziav, that were able to retain and even increase the value of the ruble. The principles behind that and the acting upon that is a good thing. The way that you do have these economic ties between not just Russia and China.
We don't want countries to fail.
Yeah, no, if you are a person with any sort of common sense, you understand that it's not good for any country to fail.
Right.
Like
even if they are perceived as an aggressor, it's not good that they fail.
Yeah, like so that's the same thing. Even like the big thing with the Russian movement that people get hung up on is like how much we talk about England or something like that, or like thinking imperial Britain still, or the certain sort of effect that they still have. At the same time, there's no wish for the downfall of the British economy. The best thing globally is for the British economy to take off in its productive capacity, for British scientists to produce these physical breakthroughs. Because the more that happens in one space, the more it becomes intelligible elsewhere as well. And you get a kind of feedback nature in a positive way that
it's almost like England's killing us. We got to how are they thinking? We got to think like them. Like we have to do something like that.
No, do you think there's maybe an aspect of that, but I'd still say that's on a lower level of this idea of like a productive competition sort of thing. There's an aspect of that, but at the same time, when you are able to work with the effects of it, it's not just doing better than the other person. It's seeing how you're able to increase the basis for this principle of composition. You can get better and better works on an artistic scale, on an economic scale, on a productive scale.
Especially if you look at somebody like that, that's a trade ally. If they're doing well, it's going to be good for us. They're also, like a foreign policy ally. They are, it's kind of like.
I think your reasoning is deeper.
Yeah, it is much deeper, but it goes beyond just like, oh, look at them. They're doing great. I feel inspired. It's like they're a part of the global economy. So when other pockets of the global economy are successful, we're all more successful because
when they fail, it's not good.
There's a vacuum. Yeah, there's a vacuum. There's a void that needs to be filled.
That's only good for a predatory class that's dependent upon the failure of their politics that then they can kind of pick off of, like what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union and Russia in the 90s.
Like the predatory class came in and took.
Yeah, that was good. That for a good handful of people, that was the best thing to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Was
for the average Sergey and
for the
Olaf.
and also for the global economy in general. And then also for like the progeny of the human race going into generations from then, that was not a good thing.
Well, that's where the oligarchs came from. I mean, that's where you look at those things that were the USSR held entities. Some of the gas rights, the oil rights, they then went into private ownership, and that's where you had this great disparity, which was good and bad in many ways.
What are there comparable? What would be an oligarch comparable to the country we live in?
Bill Gates, Elon Musk,
easy ones, yeah.
They're all
Mark Zuckerberg.
So they're all
Bloomberg for sure.
Bloomberg, yeah,
very classical in that regard.
At this point, Warren Buffett.
And there's a whole bunch underneath that we've probably never even heard of.
Yeah, and I think there's a limit to how much you could do, even sort of categorizing
An oligarch,
a villain sort of hall of
some of them aren't villains.
Well, and you got to keep in mind there's a difference between the government handing you this because it'll sway political power and keep somebody like a Putin in office for generations, and I earned this or I created this. Mark Zuckerberg created something. He wasn't given that by the United States government. No?
Yeah, he was.
There's a lot of State Department work on those kind of networks that could be composited in that way.
Right, but he created Facebook, the concept of Facebook.
He's the face of Facebook.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I don't know too much on the particulars. I've seen that
I saw the movie. Justin Timberlake told me the truth.
Yeah.
So
They killed Tom.
Yeah, they killed Tom. MySpace Tom.
The current political climate in the United States, the two-party system, in essence, has it run its course? Does it need kind of like a top-down dismantling and a rebuilding? Do you think there should be more political?
I like what Washington said, basically, and like my
George
ideal would
Washington,
almost be, yeah.
Or Kerry Washington.
People ran in like their own party form, basically. Like you were your own party. You
so
ran
basically,
as
everyone was
individual.
an independent.
I personally, but functionally, how things go, I wouldn't be against certain blocks or factions joining together to effectively produce a kind of new dynamic within the party system. Like right now we do have certain overlaps with certain, I'd say, common sense Marxists, even who are able to get beyond
What's a
the
common
sort of
sense Marxist.
Someone who's able to recognize certain principles of physical production and what Lenin actually did in the Soviet Union with his own electrification initiatives, who sees maybe the relative benefit of Marx's analysis compared to that of Ricardo and Adam Smith. But at the same time, the main blocking point there is that Marx just dismissed Henry Carey in the American School of Economy. So it's like, if you downgrade your potential to that point, I would say right now, Marx's political economy is relatively better than what was dominant at his time and his place and what basically is going on right now, because there's really not much of anything planned apart from just mass looting. But at the same time, Marx is not coming from a principle of composition. Marx is not even a breakthrough within his own time. That's why that totality of composition is so important, because it's whether you get an actual breakthrough or just a relative breakthrough. Because a relative breakthrough, if you make a principle out of that, you'll end up in something nasty down the line. So since Marx, I don't think, is really dealing fully with the entirety of philosophical and economic history prior to him, and he's not like actually at the breakthrough edge of it, and just at a sort of relative point, I think that's where you see sort of the contradictions come out in the applications of it later down the line.
So it almost gets like the idea gets corrupted. Maybe in its execution.
But he's working from a corrupted starting point, and there hasn't been, in his own thinking, there wasn't a critical engagement with the fundamental hypotheses to get to an actual principled origin of his composition, to where it was a little bit of garbage in, garbage out with what he was doing. And some of the relatively best Marxists of today will recognize that, and they'll be like, oh, well, Marx was just they'll try and downplay it as Marx was just a critique of British political economy. Like that's what Capital is called. It's a critique of political economy. And that's really I'd say the main blind spot is that there's no real functioning positive program in what he does. And it becomes sort of Gnostic platitudes at a certain point, that then whenever you have Gnostic platitudes, you let people's fantasies kind of go wild with that, and you'll get the worst terrors at the end of the day.
It seems like it's for the people that come up with those ideas, right? It would work if everyone had the same fervor and understanding of it.
Yeah, and I'd say that's,
and I think a lot of people don't. I'm not. No way am I condoning Marxist Leninists or any of that shit. You know, I don't know if we disagree on on that. But it's like, it's at the end of the day, it's like the only true artist is the person who can paint or make their own music and not have to worry about anybody to deal with, because at the end they have control over all of it. If you in a situation where it was like Russia in the late 1800s, early 1900s, not a big education system, not a lot of them could read or write. Math was one of those things. Lenin was and Marx were highly educated.
Yeah.
But to convey their life experience and how they feel and how it should run to these farmers, a lot of them were just farmers. It's going to get corrupted at some point, and it's never going to be, and I mean corrupted as in like away from what the intention was and the behaviors of what it should be.
Well, and this was really the main point of Friedrich Schiller's work in his Letters on the Aesthetical Education of Man, which was his response to the French Revolution. It was exactly talking about when you have a revolutionary moment where there's a potential for a certain sort of restructuring on a fundamental way. What do you need built up morally within the populace to begin with? That's his starting point, is that you need a sort of practice of morality within the citizenry.
But whose morality?
The morality of God, the morality of principle,
but
like a non-relativistic morality.
So what's a non-relative? Like, don't kill. Like, I'm just trying to understand, like the morality of that. What would that be defined?
I'd say Schiller's point is also it's not a rule book to it, because that was his response to Kant. Because Kant saw morality as an a priori science on the level of mathematics, where morality through this categorical imperative, basically, well, if everybody did what I'm doing right now, would things work if that happened? That was basically, in a very short way, Kant's rule for morality, and from his thinking is like, oh, then it's just a calculus. It's all equations at that point.
Yeah, but it sounds like automaton drones.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what Schiller was critiquing, is that there's a certain interaction with idea and truth and justice at that level. But if you just take it in a textbook way, morality itself has to become practiced, and he's mostly known as a dramatist and a poet, and that was his whole reason for
morality has to be practiced.
Morality has to be practiced, and he encouraged the practice of morality through his aesthetical works, through his artistic works. Artistic works are not entertainments. Artistic works are not things to pass the time. Artistic works are a necessary food for the moral soul to function, to be able to interact in the world in a real practiced way. And if we don't have a revolution at that level, there is no chance for something effectively to come about for the good at the level of political organization. That is the starting point for it. That is the starting point of the composition, according to Schiller.
It's funny because listening to you say that, there's a part of me that wants to ask you, like, just kind of more banal questions, just because it's, in ways it's like a nice break. Like, okay, given the pick of these four people, who would you vote for president? But it kind of goes back to
Cartman.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what Sam was saying towards the end of the podcast that we were on with him, and we kind of asked him, like, how do we fix this?
Yeah, I'll take the Ask the Spy challenge too.
Do you want to do that?
I will fucking.
What's your opinion? Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone?
Yeah, I thought a little ridiculous. I think there's been some
documentation.
Here's the crazy thing about it.
Well, hold on. I want to get back to it.
Dan. About 2 nights before, him and I watched the new Oliver Stone documentary. It's called JFK Revisited.
Yeah.
With new evidence, and I'm like, there is no fucking way that dude acted alone. There is no fucking way that dude acted alone.
No, but like what he said at the end, because I think we kind of were asking him those like big picture, like, are there aliens? We're asking him all this crazy stuff.
Although he does keep commenting on my posts if I found the Afghan giants yet. Nothing else that we've talked about. Yeah. He keeps asking, have you found?
Worried.
Have you found the Afghan giants?
He's worried you're going to find out something that was above his pay grade.
There might be tall people in caves.
His response to us was very similar to the response that you just gave, and I think yours was even more on a micro level. His response to how do we fix this is get involved on a local level. Run for school board, be involved. Do things like this, like get involved. Whereas you take it even more micro, and for you, it's how do you change the world? Better yourself.
But also it's develop a new global security and development architecture. Because that's the thing. When you're working with principle, it worked. It affects both the most micro and the most macro level, and those things come across in the same way.
Right.
But when you say security, it's not like armed at the gates. It's manufacturing. It's
infrastructure,
intrinsic feelings.
That was the principle of the Peace of Westphalia. Was explicitly written out is the interest of the other nation is your interest. So you won't act in a way that would in a very knowing way harm the interest of another nation. Like so the sort of thing where it's like, oh, you know, Ukraine can enter the EU or not, they can enter NATO or not. It's like, well, no, that's objectively, if you have these basically cold warring factions, it's not in Russia's security interest to have nuclear weapons within Ukraine.
So it's not good for the nation.
And so that's not good for Ukraine. And so that's not good for the West. So that's not
right.
Good. Yeah.
So the dominoes come back all the time to say, so if you use that, what's good for the nation is good for our nation. Something like that.
Yeah, it's the same way that freedom and sovereignty is not predicated upon what as an individual you can just potentially do or are allowed to do. Freedom and sovereignty is also a composition that occurs within the totality of what's going on. And you know, if you get too hung up on that, that can just sound like a displacement in order to be like, yeah, and that's what somebody says while he's, you know, in your back pockets at the same time. But that itself is what it's thinking the thing. It's like without that interaction.
It seems like we all need to take mushrooms to understand
no,
this.
not at all. That's the last.
That's the worst idea possible.
Why are mushrooms the worst thing?
Because they're
psychedelics in general or mushrooms.
Terrence McKenna is a total psyop in and of himself.
You think Terrence McKenna is a psyop? Why?
Yeah,
Tell me why Terrence McKenna is a psyop.
He's the
Do you know
worst,
who Terrence McKenna is?
I know of.
He's the worst sort of intersection of fascistic Japanese Zen Buddhism and corrupted Anglican Protestantism. In the most literal way, he started out as an Anglican priest and then had, you know, too many affairs and then went like, oh,
why is Terrence McKenna thought about that way? You know, I listen to because I always think it's about like, hey man, you're responsible for yourself, you know. And he was like, but he's like, you should take all the mushrooms.
The greatest trip is what you can do in your own sovereign mind, and all the great intellects throughout history show that in their own works. And the best trip you can have,
you don't think the
best trip you can have is reading Kepler and listening to Bach.
Do you not think that those great thinkers of the past 2,000 years have ever partaken in ergot or any of those things?
I can
wrote
assure you
shit?
it was not the basis of what they did, if any of
no
them.
No, it might have been like the thing, you know, that sparked, you know, the idea.
It's
like you
it's
can
unnecessary.
expound upon it.
It's unnecessary. And from what
I think Dan agrees with you. Dan agrees with you on that. Do you not want to agree with him?
I do agree with him. I'm looking up some Bach so we can trip balls.
Yeah. You want to do Furtwängler?
Furtwängler?
Yeah.
That sounds like my screen name when I was 12.
He's a conductor. His Brandenburg number 3 from Furtwängler.
Okay, while he's doing that,
it's like the first movement. Furtwangler.
While he's doing that, we'll play a quick game.
Okay.
Wait, can we do this? He had some questions. You were asking us questions.
Yeah.
Can you ask us?
Yeah,
you
asked us
I like
questions.
that better.
You know what?
Let's get an
No,
interrogation.
I like that
You
better.
do the
we
game.
All right,
yeah, we'll answer.
Wait. I have an idea.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
keep talking. Don't worry about me.
Okay.
Okay,
all right.
while you're at it, turn on the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Just keep talking.
Oh, yeah, got the interrogation lights on.
Ooh, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Ooh.
You might get shit out of luck.
It just keeps thinking I want Jeep Wrangler.
These are the ones we got to turn off.
So if I can ask one question while Mark's still going around. So
Dark? Is it weird?
No,
No,
this
it's
is
great.
Where do you see Scranton in the next 10 or 15 years in a positive sense? If what you can think of comes through fruition, can come through in the situation.
Oh, man, we're screwed.
Yeah.
What's
the best you can imagine for Scranton?
a secondary news source and more of an influx of independent politicians, not just singular party. I don't care if it's D or R. You need to have independent thinkers who can lead purely from a standpoint of leadership, not representing a party. I think that's the best case scenario for how we pull Scranton out of the mess it's in.
Do you see?
I have an opinion.
Okay, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I think. Are we gonna get flagged for this? How was this song?
It's Symphony number 9.
This has got to be
I
public
think
domain,
it's
I think.
Yeah, you think this is
It depends.
decades
He had
old?
he had a long career. He started out in the 20s. So
I think like any place. I think like any place that has a government or anything like that. I think that there are people who look the average voter that doesn't have the money to or the time to donate, walk door to door, to go to all the events. So they feel like they're left out. They feel like they're not part of the situation or the process. I think there's a lot of people who have look. There's generational political affiliations here from families and everything. Was your question about where do you see Scranton in 10 years?
what's your best thing you could imagine for Scranton in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Everybody that gets elected is an independent, and they're willing to work with both sides. And they're willing to compromise, and they're willing they're willing to realize that a compromise is when both sides are unhappy. They're willing to say, "Hey,
you have to be happy with being unhappy."
Yeah, and you're able to make some hard choices that are going to hurt some people's feelings, and smaller government.
Yeah, you're gonna have to fire probably half of City Hall.
So with that firing of half the City Hall, would you put those funds towards anything else?
The first thing I would do is lower taxes, especially on businesses, so that you can have developmental growth. Yeah, I mean that would be number one.
I don't. What was as
You
soon
need
as you
to
fire
listen.
everybody? What?
If you fired half a City Hall, metaphorically, what would you do, if anything, with what was freed up by that?
I mean, it's probably like it's probably less than like $1 million in payroll. I mean, that's what you're going to get, right? But then that's not the biggest problem. It's like, what else are you spending money on that you don't need, that has not shown results? Like, I'll give you, for instance, right? Dan, I can't fucking concentrate with music, which is terrible. I'll give you an example. The school district, right? The Scranton School District in particular, I think that they are so screwed because of what's happened over the last 40 years, whether it's mismanagement from the board, whether it's bad administration. It always boils back to politics. It always boils back to who you know and who you blow. It always boils back to, like, my friend needs a job, or I don't want to piss off my friend who gave me money, right? When those are your motivating factors to try to do good for the people, you're corrupted. You're just by definition, you're corrupted, right?
Yeah.
People think you say the word corruption. You look at somebody and you say, hey, I think you're corrupt. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean that I think you're evil. It means that, like, you are not going to make the best decision from your heart because you are thinking of these other factors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's the right thing to do? Maybe the right thing to do is like, hey, let's suffer for a year. We're going to get rid of all this shit. We're going to waste. The Scranton School District literally right now, I believe, has over 50 lawsuits for special ed kids that were brought upon the school district. How is that happening? How are these lawsuits? First of all, what are the special ed people doing to get criminal or lawsuits brought against them? And why has no one fixed it? Why has no one addressed the issue? It's just poorly run shit because everyone's just so. The thing about Scranton is everyone's just so used to it sucking.
Everybody's just apathetic. Like,
and there's no hope.
Become used to it.
You know, so I think people right now need truth and hope. Here's who's been screwing you. Here's the truth. It's like, remember when Robin Williams did that movie Man of the Year where he was running for president and he accidentally won? Did you ever see that movie?
I saw the trailer, yeah.
Yeah, where he's like walking past. He's like, I just farted like 12 steps back there. You know, that was me. It's like an honesty like that.
That was about Zielinski, right? Like the TV comedian that then becomes
He
president.
played a piano with his
penis.
Yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy now who is in fatigues that Nancy Pelosi's going to meet as a guy who played the piano with his penis.
So I hear the truth aspect. Where would you provide hope? So, because if you're saying there's this year of suffering because you're bringing things back down.
He and I disagree on that. I don't think you need to provide hope.
All right.
You will never.
Oh, okay, all right.
You will. People need. Think about it, Dan. Will you look up the mouse in water experiment? Have you ever heard of this?
Sounds hilarious.
I don't think so.
Tim, look up mouse water experiment. Tim Pool, TIMPOOL.
Him and his hope.
So, you're never going to get, everyone's always going to ask, if I do this, what am I going to get out of it? What is this going to do for me? And you can't say, oh, your taxes are going to get lowered, or we're going to build a park that you're not going to use, or we're going to get rail from Manhattan to here that you're never going to get on. You know, most people can't afford a day trip to New York City now. So like when you think of all the things that are used as carrots in front of the hamster wheel to get, you know, the citizens of the state or the county to do anything, they're not good. They're not enticing. They don't want to do it because there's not enough hope there. There's not enough to say, look, I think you give people hope by telling them the truth. Here are all the things that are fucked up. Here are all the things that are wrong. Totally transparent, no matter whose feelings it hurts. And then you go, but there's a way forward. And what does that way forward mean? Here's our benchmarks. We have to do this, this, and this. And we'll keep you updated. By year 1, we should do this. By year 2, we should be here. It's going to hurt some people, but here's what we need from you, the community, the business owners, the entrepreneurs. Some of these people are going to have to lose their jobs. We need you to step up and make sure that you're hiring them, and only hire them if they're the best people for the job. Otherwise, some people are going to have to go to Burger King. Sorry, but they're paying like $22 an hour right now, so it really isn't that bad, right? Did you find it?
Is this it? I don't know.
Dan, you found dancing rats. It's on YouTube.
In case you were wondering why you don't get paid.
Yeah, go on YouTube. And it's an interesting philosophy about even something as things that we treat with zero animal dignity, like rats. Did you find it?
No.
You're terrible at this, you know.
So bad.
All right, talk about something real quick. I'll find it.
Okay, yeah, because let me turn to you then with a similar question, but because it seems like you agreed with the truth telling about what's bad in the situation, and I think where Mike was going toward, is there also a truth of the potential of the situation though as well?
What do you mean?
Well, because in most classical respects, you know, truth I think had a greater conception to it than just, well, here's the truth of how everything sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, most of the strong interactions truth that I deal with are there. Well, here's a truth of how things work. Here's a truth of what we can do. Here's a truth of what is out there for you as a human being, as a citizen of Scranton. Here's a truth of what you can do and what we as a government are going to do our best to give you that potential, or to allow that potential and not get in the way of it.
Bingo. So I think somewhere along the line, people began to look at government as daddy. And I need daddy to do this for me. The truth of the matter is this: every human being creates their own destiny. We don't all start from the same place. We are all not going to end up in the same place. The goal is to help give everybody as fair of a starting point, which I think is a good role of society, and the government being part of that. I don't think people need hope. Like, it might be semantics the way that Marky and I talk about it. I don't think people need hope. I think that people need, hey, here's a clear path to success. Now let us get out of your way. I think that government has done more harm than good in the average American town. I think that they have caused more damage than they have enriched and encouraged people in the average American town. There are certain things that government does very well. They do big picture things very well. National defense, NASA, things like NASA, big, large programs like that. Some international trade things that ease things up for smaller communities within America. But I think for the most part, when you look at local government, if you look at Scranton specifically, the goal should be, we're going to do less at City Hall so you can do more at home. You keep more of your money, rather than you funneling it to us. We pay 4 different people to handle that money and then give a small portion back to you, which is how most government organizations function right now. I think what people need is, hey, this is how the city should function. This is how government should function. Should be the role of government within the city of Scranton. Here's what has happened over the past 20 years that they've done wrong in regards to that.
40.
That has led us to the point that we're at now. Here's what we're going to do to bring that back and get out of your way so that you can move forward and be more successful. I don't think that's hope. I think that's just blatant truth. It's education on the role of government. because so many people, like I've talked to so many people and they're like, we need to raise the property taxes because if we don't, we can't do boom, boom, boom. I'm like, what is wrong with you? They've squandered the money they already had. It's what Marky was saying about the school district. They've squandered all the money they already had by mismanagement and misuse. Why are we giving them more? Look at what the role of the school district is and how it should function. Let's look at where it went wrong, how we're going to fix it, and the things we're going to put in place to make sure that never happens again so that every kid gets a good education, so that every business can grow and thrive without the interference of local government. I think it's that simple.
So back to my hope thing. I found that clip. And Dan, you want to pull up 4 and play it?
They take 3 cylinders. They
Go
put
back to
rats
the
in them.
beginning.
They're full of water, and the rats swim desperately. After
Jay.
15 minutes.
There you go. Okay. This is the hope experiment.
Are you guys familiar with the Hope experiment?
Not terribly, no.
No.
They take 3 cylinders. They put rats in them. They're full of water, and the rats swim desperately. After 15 minutes, the rats give up and die. They then did another experiment. They put the rats in the cylinders. After 15 minutes, the rats give up, but then they pull the rats out, dry them off, let them rest, put them back in. Then the rats swam for 60 hours.
6-0.
Yeah, 6-0. Because they felt hope. They were like, that hand will save me again.
I think that that's what you need to give people. That example is a fraud because it's like the rat. But I think people need hope to know that, like, I'm going to fight another day. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm not going to eat a bullet or something like that.
So let me propose maybe a unity of these two positions.
Nope.
Oh, let me
I disagree.
No, I know. I understand, because I think your position would be something like, oh yeah, so let's for example, like cancel student debt once so we can get people working at Uber for 60 more years, because I think maybe that'll happen again, right? That or another variant of that. That's maybe where you'd see the hope coming in functionally, where that would play.
No, I think it's more so like a big picture view. Like even just using that analogy, I could not disagree more. I don't think you need
the hope thing.
Yeah, I don't think you need to give people hope. I think you need to give people a big dose of reality. Nobody is coming to save you. You make your own destiny. But we will get out of your way. The sky is the limit. God bless.
People will give up.
Because would you say that to an everyday citizen maybe of Moscow in the Yeltsin years in the Soviet Union in the 90s?
We are not in the Soviet Union in the 90s. We're in America.
I'm talking about here. I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say that. You should. I mean, if you're looking for a revolution, I would say that. That's what they do all the time. Like they do all the time in these situations where it's like, here's this thing that you need to be afraid of, or that's going to hurt you, or is detrimental, and we're the only, and you got to listen to us to believe you, right? If you're not honest with people, and because honestly, if you're telling them the truth, it is hard to take, especially with the way of the world. And like if anybody sat with, in total honesty, Cade, if anybody sat with you for 3 hours who was just like, let's call him a normie, their head would be spinning at the end of it, or you would have lost them in the first 7 seconds. They're just not capable of understanding that. So you kind of have to dumb it down. You have to be like, look, this is real. This is what it is. This is what it is. This is what it is. This who has done this who has done that who has done that. All these things have led us to here. It was the decisions of these things from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 weeks ago that got you where you are. But here's the thing that is insurmountable. It's not unfixable, right? But it's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take all of us coming together, forgetting about all the bullshit and just working towards a common thing of like, you want a better life for your kids. You don't want them living shitty lives. You want them well-rounded. All parents at the end of the day, you have a beautiful daughter, by the way. Beautiful daughter.
Thank you.
Like you don't want her, growing up terrified or in fear or hurt by things that she thought were true that she found out wasn't true, and it breaks her heart. It's like, so I don't think she watches this, but when I don't know if you guys do Santa, but that's like a big thing for kids, like when they find out Santa ain't real. And I think that's been trained. It's a big thing. What do you mean?
Just shows the difference in your personality and mine, because at like 4 years old, Phoenix was like, he opened his Christmas presents. He goes, look at all these great things that Santa got me. Mom and Dad, what did you get me? And I was like, that's it. Santa's not real. It's me.
Oh, you're so terrible. My kid's 9 and he still gets all jittery and excited for Santa. I love it.
Yeah, but
we still read him notes.
And that's just my mentality, though. This is the real world.
I think.
The idea of a beautiful truth seems missing, though. Because there seems to be hard truths and there seems to be maybe open truths.
So what's a beautiful
like John
truth?
Keats, the beautiful is the true and the true is beautiful.
Uh-huh.
A beautiful truth is something like Mozart's Ave Verum Corpus.
Mhm.
A beautiful truth is something like
There's also hard truths. There's also terrible truths.
but there's a difference in magnitude and quality and kind and of everything between the two, because that's the thing I would say. And when I think about with my daughter is the beautiful truths are of a superior power of the hard truths, and
so you're
even
saying
inform the hard truths.
those will supersede.
I would say that there's not even a conception of the hard truths that's not based in the beautiful truths. Because I from how I see it is that the hard truth only comes from the atrophying of a beautiful truth.
Okay, so here's a difference then. I think I come from a place where, it's like you need to know all of this now. And and if I'm getting you right, you think don't even mention it. Just say, hey, this other thing is beautiful. And by them paying attention to the beautiful things, or being appreciative of the beautiful things, and they can easily inform themselves about the negative things, going like, oh, that doesn't feel right, or that seems strange, so I'm not even just going to participate in that because I know it at best I might know it feel, at worst I might know it feels icky.
I think there's an aspect of that, but it's not necessary that you need to like and I'm not saying you're saying this, but like hide or steer away from something that's ugly. And I think it's something that you can intelligibly even talk about. But if you demonstrate the power of the beautiful and the true to somebody, that becomes almost self-similar, self-reinforcing. And it's the same thing even with the popular and oligarchical kind of distinction. There's a tragedy there because I don't believe there's any enjoyable oligarchical position. I think
so. Basically, you're saying like I don't think rich people are happy.
No, yeah, and they'll say that too. Yeah. They'll be the
Elon seems to be doing really well right now.
I think that.
Do you think he's an evil man?
I'm not his pastor.
I like that response. I just think I hear what you're saying about beautiful truth, but I think that needs to be the add-on. I think the world is an ugly place. I don't think
it's also a beautiful place.
Do you believe in God? If I can go straight to that?
Yeah.
How would you reconcile those two?
What do you mean?
Well, he looked upon it and it was good.
He looked upon it and it was good, and then there was original sin. And he left it to its own devices in many ways and has interacted with human beings throughout history. The Bible is the telling of that story. And human beings, to kind of go back to like the Calvinistic viewpoint on it, we are essentially evil. Human beings are essentially evil. I tend to take it a little bit further and go to like the Native American viewpoint. There's two wolves inside. One good, one evil. The one that wins is the one you feed. I look at the world as the world is an evil place. There is beauty in it, but
you think it's an evil place first?
Yes.
Oh, why did God create an evil place?
He didn't. He created a good place, and then Adam and Eve. If you believe that,
forget about Adam and Eve. Is a beautiful place.
Why did God create something that became evil?
Because you can't have a relationship with somebody unless there's the ability to hate and the ability to love. You cannot truly hate something unless you are willing to be hurt by something.
Is that the balance? Maybe that's like one of
I
those
don't even
things.
know. Maybe I see something as superior there, because even the way you're saying that is that you're saying, well, this capacity for hate is necessary within the greater capacity of love.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me though that love is of the predominating power, the same way that maybe the capacity for evil within
love is the predominating power, yes, but fear is a stronger feeling than love.
Okay,
let me put it to you this way: it's the old phrase,
recalled experience, recalled memory. Fear or pain is easily more recalled than love for most people.
Yeah, if you live in a city that basically B.F. Skinner designed.
Who's B.F. Skinner?
He's the behavioral psychologist that came from Scranton and designed.
Oh no!
The rat boxes.
We brought a scumbag.
Yeah.
Well, let me put it to you this way: I think that the beauty and hard graft are equally as important. I think hard graft is more important. I think it's more important for people to know that they have to work hard in order to achieve success. I think if all that we show people is you could be a TikTok star too, it doesn't help society.
Well, wait, isn't it a beautiful truth though that it is hard work that produces success, and doesn't that make the hard work itself an enjoyable part of the process?
It's a truth. I don't know if it's beautiful.
I never thought this would be more controversial than abortion.
Let me put it to you this way. It's an old phrase.
I think it's how you look at the world.
It's an old phrase. Many people have said it different ways, but it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
I look, I agree with that. And I think there's a time and a place for that. I also think that like even people who say that you need to like as masculine, like as men, right? People, that Jordan Peterson says like you're a wolf. You always have to be the wolf. The trick is to pull it back, to be like a normal person instead of being like a subdued person who lashes out as a wolf. It's easier to acknowledge who you are and then control it, right? I come from the point of view where I think, we focus on the pain because we ignore the beauty. We seem to ignore the things that are beautiful. And I think that human beings just in general need to just go back and focus on, the beauty of a caterpillar who's, I'm telling you, you think it's weird, man. I think that's beautiful.
I don't think it's weird. I just think that like, if we're over here staring at caterpillars, the bad guys are out there, the Huns are at the gate.
Well, how do you get
warriors talk about beauty too?
How do you get over the Huns though, right? Because you have a capacity as a human to produce a composition of a greater beauty than what is the beauty within natural composition, which is there. Yeah. Like your method of action, even in the most warrior mindset, is still fundamentally of the human position. If you're talking about the flanks and strategies of warfare, that's nothing without this idea of composition.
I agree, but I think we're kind of diverging from what we were talking about.
No. I think he's onto something. He's like even like strategy is beautiful. Like
okay, yeah,
like
so
that,
okay, so
coming like that should. It's not evil. It's not negative. It's like the fact that people can come up with this and
well, St. Augustine had a doctrine of just warfare, which like it's not.
I think I understand what you're saying. Like a phrase that I really like, and a bunch of like coaches throughout the years have said it. You have to fall in love with the process of becoming great. When you're talking about sports, I'm talking about specifically. The beauty is the end product, but there is a beauty to the build up to that end product. The scientific building of that. I understand. Is that what you're kind of referring to as the beauty of it?
Yeah, there's an aspect of that. And I don't want to be totally going against the idea of no pain, no gain, or the idea of where hard work comes into it. But right. I think from the principled perspective of the beautiful, like that which Schiller gives us in both his artistic and philosophical works, you can be in the direct harmonious enjoyment of that hard work, and it reinforces itself without this idea of the necessary suffering. I think that is the thing politically, as a culture, as a people in the United States, that holds us back the most right now. The idea that suffering itself is the necessary ingredient toward the good, and not a mistake in the approach towards it. And I'd even go back to Leibniz's principle of least action to inhabit that. That if you are noticing a certain antagonistic tension that's predominant in what you are doing, you are in a sort of false vacuum. You are above the naturally composed least action path that'll get you towards the harmonious resolution of what you're trying to do.
I don't disagree.
That made total sense to me. I was just really excited that I understood it.
No, I understand what you're saying. It's like a very what's the best way to say this? Like almost like a Buddhist monk-like mentality of there is beauty in the everyday. Like there's beauty in the process of, better today than you were yesterday, better tomorrow than we are today. There's a beauty to that, to evolving a human being, to, in everything that you do. Like whether it's building a business, building a career, raising a family, perfecting, an instrument, any of those things, there's a beauty to becoming a better version of whatever that part of your life is. I get that. But I think I think what people need to hear is the reality of life is this: even if you're in a career that you love and it's like your ideal career when it comes to work, you really enjoy and are doing the fun part 20% of the time. The other 80% of the time, you're slugging it out. And that's just a reality of life. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, it's called work for a reason. You don't have to find, I don't think you have to find beauty in everything. I think you need to have aspects of your life that fulfill your soul. But you also have to have things that put food on the table.
And I guess that's maybe just to try and wrap it up in that image of a composed totality. Because
people are holistic.
Yeah. So when we in the LaRouche organization, when Lyndon LaRouche, when he so strongly endorses classical music compared to modern atonal music, it's not because like
he doesn't like jazz.
He doesn't like jazz. It's not because
wait, he really doesn't like jazz?
The one violinist he worked with strongly, the Amadeus Quartet, he's got some more apologetics for jazz as a different sort of register. But the reason that classical music is endorsed and so strongly encouraged as being part of your cultural life isn't because like, well, that modern stuff, it sounds icky, it's there's so much tension, and the classical stuff, it just sounds good all the time. That's not the case when you look into classical music. The actual development and progression of classical music is absolutely dependent upon the introduction of tension and antagonism within the piece, but then the composed resolution of it. The problem is when you remove the composed resolution. And so I think we have strong points of agreement here. I think what I'm just trying to focus on is that when you can see what you're doing within a composed totality and see it from the idea of it in the future, which is another topic, a great thing to go into on a literal level. But the points of tension beautifully intertwine into the known composed totality and resolution, to where they do not stick out on an effective level as even a suffering moment, and not in a Buddhist way of this abandonment or foreclosure of suffering, but where it is known in a real sense of knowledge and not just of textbook knowledge, how what is being done in the moment contributes to the idea of the composed totality. And it's really easy just hearing those words to imagine, well, that could be interpreted as someone's like, oh, they just got this fantasy at the end of the day, and then they sort of rationalize everything through that.
Yeah.
But that's where this idea of practice of composition comes into it, because if you have that practice of moral composition, you get a knowing sense of whether this is actually producing that harmonious resolution or not.
So so I need to be able to wrap my head around it. You're saying there's a lot of similarities between the Sixth Symphony and Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi.
No, I think he's saying there's not a similarity there.
I'm joking, Marky. Jesus.
I think Living on a Prayer brings out the best of Motown, and maybe if we can get a modern composer in the classical tradition to work those melodies within a strong contrapuntal scheme.
Do you know what the modern day version of like the Beethoven and stuff are? It's film composers, like really good ones, like really good film composers. They do everything that they build a tension, they have a resolution, there's a theme, it's
not just like opening verse,
yeah,
chorus, bridge,
it's not made by committee, you know. But it takes all of the scope, breadth, experience, hurt, failures, all of that to get to where that is, and I think that is beautiful.
And it's one of the few places I think where you can have something of a classical composition hidden within popular media. If you try and analyze it from, let's say, the scientific perspective, its level of counterpoint often still doesn't even hit what's at the Bach era or something like that. There's still like a metric of this development, so it's still kind of in a purgatory of just reproducing sort of classical theorems of before for the most part. But I would agree that it's a space where at least you can get a form of classical composition to interact with.
We've been doing this for 2.5 hours.
For sure.
Do you got to get out of here?
It's up to you guys.
We probably all should.
I was just about to start talking about jam bands too. Damn.
I'm more of a Juggalo guy than a Grateful Dead guy.
You're a Juggalo?
Okay. I went to the Juggalo March, but we could save that for
later. Are they like
there's little interaction between the two spaces apart from
next time you come in, you could talk about the Juggalos. I'll talk about our jam bands, and you guys could just chill.
Real quick, what do you think? hopefully we get you back on soon. I really love talking to you. I really love listening to you. It's
It's a good time. It's a good look at a different worldview.
I feel like my brain's getting worked.
We should have some committees for the future of Scranton in the meantime as well.
We'll talk about that off the podcast.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck getting us all to agree. What if the way that I see the world going? I have no idea. A lot of crazy shit has happened over the last 2 years that I've recently found out that has been happening for a long time. I never realized all the crazy shit going on. I know that a lot of wars are not, wars. It's basically like, the people in charge are pissed off at the other people and they want to go do things, right? Where do you foresee? We were talking earlier about like Russia and England are talking about nuclear weapons. Do you see that happening?
That's a real potential. Like, you could say it's a 5-7% thing, but it's never been a 5-7% thing before. Like,
what would be the impetus for that? What would be the straw that broke the camel's back for that to happen?
From what I've heard and seen is that the automation of the Russian defense system isn't the best. Mix that with
what do you mean they have Skynet? Like they're just
it might be a little bit outdated. Mix that with people in NATO and the West more strongly encouraging the idea of a first strike approach. If you get a sort of Strangelove situation, who was that? Was it President Muffy? Was that his name? Biden's very much in the position, I think, of the president in that movie where he's not a Kennedy figure for sure. He's not going to put his foot down on some sort of Strangelove proposal from his Security Council.
Dude, come on, man.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. But even if that doesn't come to fruition, the hotter that talk gets, the more there is a terrifying logic to the Russian position of, well, we have this superiority.
Yeah.
They might actually fucking nuke us. So we should use this while we have the chance to.
I think basically the big fear is it's a strike first mentality.
Yeah.
Whoever hits the red button first wins. I think that's the mentality.
Yeah, but do you think that like they're gonna do you think they're gonna drop if they did? Hypothetical, this is all fantasy land for right now. Part of me thinks that they wouldn't drop it on a population center. Part of me thinks that like, man, they might do that in the English Channel and just give everybody a real close view of like how close this could be.
There's no point to that.
I think if you look at some of the reports from Scott Ritter, who was worked with Marine Intelligence, he was the UN weapons inspector who sounded the alarm about the Iraq, the lack of weapons of mass destruction for years beforehand.
Hey, Sam Fettis was over there, right? Did you pay attention to?
I heard the Afghanistan stuff too. Yeah.
No, he was in Iraq. Sam.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah,
he was one of the people that was tasked with finding it.
Yeah. But Scott Ritter's talked about how actually light Russia has gone into Ukraine, where compared to if you look at us,
it seems like they sent in the
Iraq,
C team, man.
But there's a part of a reason to that, and when you see them hitting population centers more often than not, it's where either the National Guard generally or Azov battalion in particular have held up in population centers, which is a war crime in and of itself if you put your military positions within population centers. And so if it came to a first strike from Russia, I would assume it would be under a similar mentality where they'd be mostly aiming to neutralize whatever nuclear capacities were most threatening them. If we happen to put those in major population centers, then that would be part of the major front. And I would think I would look toward whatever happens with the Dark Eagle missile in Western Germany.
It's no different than what Japan did in World War II. They didn't hit mainland U.S. They didn't hit Los Angeles. They hit the power structure that was closest to them.
So in essence, it's
Pearl
like
Harbor.
if there's weapons in a place that happens to be a population center, but they're terrible weapons.
In England, they would be hitting Air Force bases.
Yeah, and then also, I really recommend the interview we did with Colonel Richard Black as a former Virginia State Senator. I was high up in the JAG structure. This was just a week or two ago, and he details what it would be like if Russia had a nuclear strike upon Northern Virginia, which he saw
Northern Virginia
around the DC area, which he saw as a likely, if it were to happen, a possibility.
Well, guys.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Here, let's end it. Hold on, let me find this. Because Dan didn't find it. Did you find the Wesley Clark thing?
Oh, I did.
Oh, can you pull it
Maybe.
up?
I don't know because I'm not sure if it's the right one.
I found it.
Okay,
I'm going to send it to you. How do I airdrop this?
You can't. You would have to send him the link.
All right, hold on one sec. I might be able to airdrop this.
I don't think you can airdrop a YouTube video.
I'm going to try, Micah. Everyone needs to stop yelling at me.
Come on, Mark, just do it.
Hold on. I'm copying the link, and then the link
Believe it
won't
or not,
paste.
it'd be quicker if we had Dan do it.
Can I ask for a link or two to go into the description too? When this
Yeah. Spout them off while we're doing
Is
this.
this the one?
One would be that I'll get you the link to that Colonel Black interview. It's really important. It's done by Executive Intelligence Review, and then also a link to the LaRouche plan for Ukraine and the global economy generally, which we just put out, and I think a link to a recap of the conference we just had.
Yeah, we send a link. Will you send us? Will you email us the links or something? Want to pause that real quick?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll send those your way.
Let's watch this real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
Okay, so just for context, this is General Wesley Clark. I believe in 2003. I believe prior to this, he was. I forget what his designation. I mean, he's a general, but I forget where he was stationed or what he was responsible for. But he was a big deal, especially at that time after Iraq. This is what he said after he, I guess, got out of there. Or no, he was Clinton. Maybe he was Clinton. I don't know. Who the fuck knows? I'm an idiot.
Through the Pentagon, and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said,
And they
"I guess
laugh.
they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you."
That's an orchestrated thing. That's a plan. We're going to go infiltrate and overthrow sovereign countries, and we're going to manipulate them, and we're going to whatever the hell it is that we do that we want in those places. That has been a plan for a very long time. I don't if they can do that, Ukraine is it's possible. It's possible that there's influence there. And I think it's long-term influence. I think it's stuff that you talk about where here's all these people, here's all the players involved, here's all the intentions that they want. And I don't think that it's just Russia bad, Ukraine good, China bad, China good. The CCP, I'm not a big fan of the CCP. That doesn't mean that's all of China. I watched those people get locked up and jump from buildings recently, and it's terrifying to just see that a people become to that. So that's why I wanted to show that. Tell me about the group. Where can we find it? And then you're going to send us links that we can put in the description.
Yeah, so I'm representing the LaRouche organization.
Hey, what did they think about the last time you were on here? Were they like?
Well, they liked it. Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't think we were.
Okay. Email high fives, that kind of thing.
You got a high five?
Yeah.
All right.
Did you say an email high five?
Yeah, metaphorically. Yeah. But yeah, it's the LaRouche organization. We got a new URL. It's thelarouche.org. Nice, fancy that way.
Did you say URL?
Yeah, URL.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Also, Executive Intelligence Review is the magazine that we put out weekly, and we also have daily alerts. We're just on Telegram
Executive
now.
Intelligence Review.
Right, yeah.
Such things in there are.
It'll basically give you the best information on the current global strategic situation that you will find anywhere. We have both a weekly magazine with in-depth articles, and we have daily alerts that give you the briefing from the previous day's news. And we just put up a Telegram channel as well under Executive Intelligence Review.
Oh, you got a Telegram?
We got a Telegram, yeah. We're just working on the logo a little bit.
Is it up?
It's up, yeah. Executive Intelligence Review. I can send you the link too.
No. I'm on Telegram.
And then the Schiller Institute, which is also associated with us, just had a major conference involving the ambassador of Russia to the United States on the need to develop a new security and development architecture. This Saturday, no, we'll probably be past that. So look for upcoming conferences continuing this dialogue with different diplomatic figures globally, and you can find both the conference in full and a recap of it that briefs it down to some of the major sections, both on YouTube, on the Schiller Institute YouTube site. And anybody who wants to get in touch with me directly, either from the Scranton area or more generally, you can just email me at cadelevinson@gmail.com. I can get you in touch with further people in the organization if you want to contribute more or put more of your time and effort into it. And we've got a lot of stuff on the horizon that we're looking to expand more so out towards, especially I'm looking to do a lot more in this city as well.
In this city?
Absolutely.
Well, we'll have to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I want to thank you. I think that, man, you know a lot about world politics, treaties, global history, or, I think it's such a breath of fresh air to sit back and not talk a lot. So I want to thank you, for coming in and taking your time. And, anything else to say? No.
Say it. Dan, do you want to say it?
What a week.